and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning, everybody. Call the meeting to order. Start with board action to approve our agenda this morning. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved, Madam Chair.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any public input on the agenda items as just the list itself? All right, if not, Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine,
Yes. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
Also moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public input on the consent agenda? All right, if not, Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. We'll move on to regular business. First item on regular business is a second reading and public hearing. So before we read that, for the public hearing, first of all, the staff's going to present the agenda item, and then I will ask the applicant for any testimony that they would like to give. That would be the person or people who brought that forward, the ordinance itself. Then I'm going to ask other proponents for testimony, and then I will ask opponents for testimony. Both of those will be limited to a total of 30 minutes. And then I will ask proponents for rebuttal testimony, which will be limited to 10 minutes. I'll close testimony, and then commission discussion will open, and the commission may ask proponents and opponents to provide any additional testimony. If there are several people that wish to speak on the same topic, you may pick a spokesperson, and that is encouraged to avoid repetition, so we use our time wisely. So with that, first, second reading and public hearing for an ordinance of Lincoln County, South Dakota, amending section 154.021, definitions, section 154.057, A1, permitted special uses, section 154.077, RR, permitted special uses, section 154.097, R1, permitted special uses, section 154.117, C, permitted special uses, section 154.137, I1, permitted special uses, section 154.157, I2, permitted special uses, section 154.177, RC, permitted special uses, and adding a new section 154.254, transmission pipelines. The Planning Commission recommended approval with amendments with a 3-2 vote. So first, I'll ask the applicant for testimony. Mr. Ventura, did you want to come up and present testimony at this time? You'll be limited to 10 minutes.
Can we have this up and running, Toby? Anthony James Ventura, 47763 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034. The reason and concern why the people have filed this. Lincoln County Comprehensive Plan Environmental Constraints Map shows a problem where the pipeline is to be built. It's not up and working, Toby. So there's a map here, and then I'm going to give you, this is the environmental constraints map. It shows problems, and if you go down to here, it goes severe sloping. This is where the pipeline is being designed from the ethanol plant up. This is a 15 to 16% grade in places. It's mostly silt and sand, and so any kind of disturbance can cause a huge landslide and loss of land. And so why are we looking at permitting, allowing, or letting somebody bore through something that's not soft or heavy enough to protect that land? Agricultural land is supposed to be used for farm-related uses only and can freely operate without non-competing use. Development, number 6. The premature development of the agricultural land should be discouraged. Number 8, protect the agricultural areas for uses which interfere and were not compatible with general farming practices. Page 39, the existing level of support services can be severely strained and farming operations adversely impacted by non-farming uses. The county must strive to protect the integrity of its agricultural resources to ensure that the industry remains a vital part of the local economy. If the 750-foot setback is not appropriate, feel free to change it to what you think is. The map that I saw this weekend with all the blue circles is misleading. There's not enough indexes and there's not enough variables put in place, so it is false. If this project goes through, there's many farmers that's land is being cut in half. They have no way to get their goods to market. This is a violation of the Interstate Commerce Act. Will the county or state have to use eminent domain to give us access to a property and others so we can get to market? Is Lincoln County ready to seize more property to allow access? Hospitals must be placed in a location for development issues for responsible zoning must be included. Even Summit at the last discussion pointed out that he wanted to be included in all the districts. I said, sure, let him have it. What's the deal? We're here to negotiate and talk. The Planning and Zoning Board made the changes. The one thing I've learned about this, when both sides are a little unsatisfied, it is probably the best for both. I also feel that it's time for a new planning and zoning director. I think we would have already had this problem done, and the boards would not be so torn up if we introduced our own CDBG proposal in Lincoln County. Please pass or vote against this proposal so the people can decide on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Our planning and zoning director, Toby, was there anything you wanted to add as far as the agenda item? Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to move on and ask proponents for testimony. These would be folks in favor of passing this ordinance. You'll be limited to a total of 30 minutes. So if one person comes up and talks the whole 30 minutes, the timer is going to be set for 30 minutes. So when we're done, we're done. So if any proponents wish to come up and testify, now would be the time to do so. And please state your name and address before you speak.
Ernest Strautmeyer, 28503 474 Avenue, Worthing. This map was developed by landowners in Minnehaha County utilizing a publicly available study on CO2 pipeline rupture modeling that states the potential impact zone of 12.5 inline miles. We use a higher end of the potential zone to illustrate what such a plume could look like. We have not run an impact or rupture model, so this is not official information. It is merely us showing that according to the public knowledge, a rupture is nothing to mess around with and could have consequences far beyond the setback being proposed. The 12.5 inline we based this off would be greater than the proposed 8 inline navigators currently proposing through the county, but nearly a third of the volume of the 24-inch line Summit is proposing. So this is a very generous map compared to what Summit may be looking at internally. The point of the map is to show that the burden of proof should be on the companies to release their internal plume modeling so that the public and our elected officials can see what risk these companies are willing to put into the public for the sake of profit.
Good morning, Scott Montgomery, Fairview, South Dakota. As you all well know, back in 2022, there was a rupture down in Satartia, Mississippi. And because of that, PHMSA came out, and they said the U.S. Department of Transportation Pipeline and Safety Hazard and Materials Administration today announced it's taking steps to implement new measures to strengthen its safety oversight of carbon dioxide pipelines around the country and protect communities from dangerous pipeline failures. The new measures, as well as the enforcement action taken today, are a result of PHMSA's investigation into the CO2 pipeline failure in Satarsha, Mississippi. They haven't followed through with that yet. They're still waiting for those regulations to be made, and I don't know why we would rush into a dangerous pipeline, proven dangerous pipeline, until those new regulations are made. It seems to me that there's a big push to get this done before those regulations come out, because it'll probably change things. Another thing I'd like to bring out, and probably the main thing I'm asking of you people today is, in the County Commissioner's Handbook on page 13, what are some of the responsibilities of the County Commission? To protect the general health and safety of the county residents. And that's what I'm asking you guys to do today. This pipeline is dangerous. Satarsha, Mississippi was a mile away from the pipeline, and they evacuated that entire town. People there, 45 people were hospitalized. So the 750 feet is not nearly far enough from anything. I think you need to let that weigh heavily on you. What the past has proven, that these pipelines are extremely dangerous, and we need to do something to protect the citizens of Lincoln County. Thank you very much.
Jay Lems, 208 Central Circle, Harrisburg, South Dakota. Thank you for taking the time today to consider a reasonable setback in regards to these hazardous pipelines. I think we can all agree that these are some of the most contested and debated pipelines to have ever proposed a route through Lincoln County. I believe the reason for such a controversy is because carbon capture is a fairly new technology, and nothing like these proposed projects has ever been done on such a large scale before. This brings me to my main concern of how these proposed pipelines are going to affect future economic development in our county. With the already existence of a natural gas pipeline and an oil pipeline going through our county, how will the addition of 2 carbon capture pipelines affect future development? As someone who works in the business of farmland management, I can tell you firsthand that we had an 80-acre parcel of land last year that no-saled on auction, and one of the determining factors of that no-sale was due to the fact that one of these pipeline companies has their pipeline routed right through the middle of that particular parcel. The fact of the matter is, if farmers are hesitant to buy a parcel of land because it has a carbon capture line running through it, future developers are certainly not going to be interested in the sale of such a property due to the restrictions placed on those properties. Another thing to consider is building eligibilities. Anyone who owns an eligibility or multiple eligibilities on a parcel of land with a carbon capture line will ultimately be limited to where they can place those eligibilities, and it will affect the overall value of said eligibilities. My, I guess, rhetorical question to you is this: why would we want to limit potential development in the fastest growing county in South Dakota? And because of these reasons, I would like to encourage you to please either vote in favor of this ordinance or consider approving even higher setbacks due to these concerns. Thank you for your time.
Gary Myers, resident of South Dakota. I would like to know how many of these pipeline lobbyists, or I'm a lifelong resident of South Dakota. I would like to know how many of these pipeline lobbyists, lawyers, and investors can say that. I am here to appeal to your sense of patriotism to pass this ordinance, as your very own Zoning and Planning Commission has recommended. They worked very hard and listened to their constituents to come up with this recommendation. And unless you feel they are unqualified or that you are smarter than they are, you need to take what they have proposed and approve as is. At that meeting, I heard the comment that you should follow Minnehaha County's lead and pass an ordinance similar to theirs. Well, let me tell you, the Minnehaha County Zoning and Planning also came up with an ordinance that would have protected landowners, and then the county commissioners tore it apart to make sure that the pipeline companies had a clear path to bulldoze over anybody that got in their way. Minnehaha County Commissioner Joe Kipley approved it at Zoning and Planning, and then decided to use his power as a commissioner to push 3 amendments to the ordinance to weaken it in favor of the pipeline companies. One amendment in particular was dealing with the number of feet, the setback, allowed between the pipeline and a resident's home. I'll refer to this setback as the kill zone. Now, I also heard several comments at the Lincoln County Zoning and Planning meeting that they said they needed to see a map before setting this kill zone setback. The map is to make sure that this project has a clear path to proceed. It was clear to everybody in this room that the lives of Lincoln County residents, same as Minnehaha County, were expendable, all in the name of money. Now, I don't know what these companies have promised you, all in the name of donations, grants for dog parks, bike trails, or other perks to your community. But I knew they have threatened to sue your ass if you pass an ordinance that gets in their way. Have you heard of the name Jared Bosley? If not, he is a farmer from Brown County in northern South Dakota that tried to stand up against these companies. They took him to court with allegations that he threatened their lives, but they never provided any evidence of such. But the judge put a restraining order on him so that he couldn't come within so many feet of a Summit Carbon employee or contractor. The sheriff shows up one day on his farm and holds him prisoner on his own farm while Summit Carbon Solutions commences to drive in with pickups and trucks loaded with heavy well drilling equipment, which they unloaded and drove through his gates out into his cropland and fields. And they positioned armed guards on all 4 corners of the section to make sure no other farmer got in their way. This well drilling equipment was used to drill 90-foot deep test holes to bury a pipe 4 feet deep. Sounds to me like they want control of this South Dakota land for more than just burying a pipeline. This is no different than a private company coming into your home while making you stand outside and snoop around to decide what color carpet they're going to install in your home. And while they're installing the carpet in your home, they would force you to leave the property until they were finished. And once they let you back in, they could come into your home anytime they pleased to make sure you didn't do anything to their carpet. And they could dictate how many people you could invite into your home for wear and tear on their carpet. If that sounds absurd, that's exactly what's happening to our South Dakota landowners. I saw a poster. Do you know why China isn't worried about climate change? It's because they already have a communist government. I'm sure you already know China has ties to these pipeline companies, as do Saudi Arabia, South Korea, BlackRock, Vanguard, and a host of other high-dollar investors that couldn't pick South Dakota out on a map. Everybody in this room, including the pipeline lobbyists, know that any of you who propose lowering the setback distance or further weakening the ordinance that has been approved by the Zoning and Planning is proposing to trade the lives of Lincoln County residents in exchange for money. The elephant in the room is we all know we don't have a CO2 problem in South Dakota. Our corn crops, bean crops, grasslands, gardens, trees all need CO2 to grow. These pipeline companies are being funded by our tax dollars, and when it's all said and done, there will be some very rich people throughout the world that got there on the backs of the people you represent. Please don't lower the kill zone of your county residents and pass this, and please pass this ordinance as is. Summit Carbon Solutions is hoping you lower it so they don't have to sue you. That way, it's much easier to pick off the farmers one by one. If Summit Carbon Solutions or Navigator wants this pipeline so bad, make them do it like any other private business. Do it where they can get 100% approval. I haven't heard any landowners here testifying in favor of these private foreign invested companies.
Gary, I didn't get your address.
Minnehaha County, South Dakota.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Rodney Miles, 27530 470th Avenue, Lenox. Minnehaha County's ordinance referred to the setback that they had as a evacuation zone. And John Marney, the expert of navigators who recommended 1,500 feet for a 18 to 20 inch pipeline, referred to it as a buffer zone. We're not supposed to talk about safety and things like that, but at the 2-day convention with PHMSA, they were on record, and I can provide the evidence, that they do not regulate setbacks on safety. So basically, you got Summit saying 500 feet, and we've got people in this room whose houses are 100 to 200 feet away from these pipelines. So PHMSA comes out with their new regulations that says we need a 1,500-foot setback. You can't have inhabited residents living that close to it. What happens to all these houses that are already built? Do they come underneath the condemnation process then? Can basically the government force them to give up their homes? They obeyed the county ordinances, the building codes, everything to put these places together, whether they added onto a farmstead or built a new house. They could be at jeopardy of losing their houses also. I would like to think that, we're going to take and look at who was here first and who is coming in, and basically the other side claims that we're changing the game in the middle of it. But it's not a game to us, and we're the ones who are basically being jeopardized between losing our property rights, whether it's building eligibilities, and possibly our homes. We don't know what PHMSA is going to do, and nobody can predict that. And that's what we're asking for protection from you guys for. And I know there was a comment made earlier last year by one of the commissioners that shouldn't waste time and effort on this project because you had a growing crime rate in northern Lincoln County. But to me, trying to force somebody to take away their possessions against their will and putting their lives, the lives of their families, neighbors, friends at risk is also a crime. So I really like to hope that you guys will take and consider the strongest ordinance you can. And then if you would, I'd also like to ask you to write a letter to the PUC and ask them not to permit anything until PHMSA gets these new regulations put out. Thank you.
Al Swathog, 48198 Kim Circle, Brandon. I'm just going to make this really brief. What do we don't know? Do we know how much water is going to be required by CCS, by carbon sequestration? We don't know. Summit actually revealed to the City Council of Lamberton, Minnesota, that they will need 14 million gallons of water annually for their process. Another thing that we don't know is if, or when, or if we can get insurance that would cover damage caused by an event on the pipeline. Will there be damage to roads by the construction process? Will traffic patterns be disrupted? Summit did not provide information to Lamberton, Minnesota about what the waste of their process, what it would be, what would be in it, and how it should be handled. And Navigator has not made a detailed commitment to providing first responder training and equipment. Navigator has not provided a plume model. Navigator has not provided a map identifying high consequence areas. With all this missing information, how can you even form a setback, a reasonable setback? And I agree with the last speaker that we should do what we can to postpone this, wait for PHMSA to formulate pipeline regulations around CO2 pipelines. And I also urge you to send a message to the PUC with concerns about this pipeline. There was a plume model for Sarsha, Mississippi. They identified areas of high risk. It failed. Sarsha was not identified as a high-risk area, and the plume model did not show that it was in danger. I don't think we can formulate a setback without more information. Thank you.
Carol Hoynes, landowner in Lincoln County. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 3112 West Auburn Hills Court. I've spent about the last 4 or 5 days listening to the PUC hearings for Navigator. I don't know if you have. I wanted to bring in 2 file folders about this sick of research that I have done concerning this pipeline going across land. A couple of the things that I heard from the PUC in the last couple of days is the plume study in Satartia was completed after the pipeline broke. If it had been done before, it would have shown that the people there were in the area. Another thing they said is the responders there had no idea there was a pipeline going there. Don't know. 500 people were in Pierre. You've heard all the arguments before against this. We know why Governor Noem, through our research, seems to be not interfering with anything going on here. She got 2,000 petitions on her desk. I have yet to see any response to that. Maybe I'm not on it. This morning, Caroline News, when I pulled it up, there was an article in there about a woman that testified that if the public had a plume study, they wouldn't understand it. I disagree with that. I would like to know what happens when that pipe breaks 4 miles north of town, this town, with a 50-mile-an-hour wind. As far as the money they've spent so far on all this, yes, I hear advertisements every day on the radio, on the TV, fronts of newspapers, green sheets. I got a card yesterday about a meeting. I believe it was yesterday. I saved it. It was mailed from Houston about a meeting for Summit. I got it a day after the meeting was over, so I couldn't attend. I'm sorry. Also, Rural Water was there. My letter of condemnation, which they want to sue me for, states that it's also against Rural Water. Listening to testimony yesterday, Rural Water said that if they build their pipe underneath theirs, they have a base there, and water sets into that base and eventually will erode away the base for the Rural Water pipeline going through, which means somebody will have to come in and tear that up to fix it, because there's another pipeline crossing under it. That's my understanding. There's too many facts that have not been brought forth. There's too much information out there that has not been researched properly. A PHMSA study, not PHMSA, but Dr. John Abraham testified that he can do a plume study within a short time, where Navigator yesterday said it would take at least 5 weeks to get a study. What is the rush? Dr. Abraham said he could get one done. He's from the University of St. Thomas, and I believe it. I think we need to slow this thing down. I think we need to put setbacks in place, and you need to protect your farmer. Or you can put on my tombstone, probably cause of death, CO2 pipeline.
Jessica Paloma, Lincoln County. I don't know if you guys have read this book before, The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, A Proper Resistance to Tyranny and a Repudiation of Unlimited Obedience to Civil Government. So you are a lesser magistrate, and you are a representative of the government. And it's your job to protect these people that you represent here. This book is all about the Constitution, the rule of law, and where that comes from. And that comes from God's law. God's moral law as a higher law provides an objective standard whereby one is able to discern right from wrong, good or evil. The higher law exists independent of the authority of any government, and all governments of men are accountable to it. The tyrant state abhors the objective standard to which it is accountable. Rather, it flourishes in a subjective environment, and it wants to be accountable to no one. So, our law is revealed law or divine law, and is found in the Holy Scriptures. It should always be remembered that this law, whether natural or revealed, flows from the same divine source, the law of God. The lesser magistrate has a duty, a right, and a duty to act in defiance of unjust and unmoral laws. The disobedience of a lesser magistrate is not subjective. He is only justified in defying the higher authority when the higher authority clearly contravenes the law of God or makes a law which is clearly an attack upon the person, liberty, or property of the people in the lesser magistrate's jurisdiction, or makes law or policy which violates the Constitution. Property rights are protected by the divine law, the moral law, and the law of the supreme law of the land, the Constitution. And it is your duty, and you are accountable to God for your decisions that you make. So let's not forget what's really going on here. We all will answer to our Creator one day. So I hope you don't make the wrong decision. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. You've just received a packet of information with a map and an explanation of the models used to create that map.
Can you state your name and address?
My name is John Stever, reside 46850 276th Street, Lenox. This map illustrates plume models, not for the safety of area residents, but to indicate economic and development dead zones in Lincoln County. Lincoln County is ripe for business, industrial, and residential development, especially areas near our communities of Sioux Falls, Harrisburg, Worthing, T, Lenox, and here in Canton. You don't need to spend much time on Zillow to know that some land within Lincoln County, housing developments can be $150,000 an acre. And quarter sections for development can now be worth over $10 million. What will this same land be worth in 12 years when the 45Q tax credits and pipeline companies' funding run out? If current trends continue, a $10 million quarter section could be worth up to $20 million. Are farmers in the pipeline's path compensated for the future value of their land, or the value extracted from the fear of eminent domain? And what is the future value of the land that can never be developed because it is crossed diagonally by a CO2 pipeline? If you don't think pipelines matter to future land valuations, please consider spending time on acrevalue.com, which clearly labels all the gas and transmission lines for their impact. Our Lincoln County Comprehensive Plan states, and I quote, "Agricultural land is commonly viewed as a temporary use just waiting for the opportunity to be developed." If all agricultural land is just waiting to be developed, then respectful siting of pipelines is essential on all land. The 100-foot to 150-foot easements that accompany pipelines forever intrude on the ability for future development. Physical access at will by pipeline companies through the use of vehicles, drones, and by individuals is intrusive to privacy. The potential for leaks and rupture gives potential industrial, business, and residential developers pause because of the risk to the developer. Land transactions can be protracted and influenced by stakeholders such as realtors, bankers, insurance agents, whose purpose is solely to assess the risk of each investment. As far as ag land goes, one of the few remaining ways for young farmers to get their start in family farms to bring kids back to the farm is through animal agriculture. It is well known that as Sioux Falls Metro expands, buying land for farming becomes increasingly out of reach for young farmers. Adding animal agriculture to an existing farming operation gives young farmers a chance to support their families on a multi-generational farm. Disrespectful siting of pipelines can prevent families from building the necessary buildings to bring their families home to a farm that can be sustained into the future. The impacted landowners and adjacent property owners did not ask for this pipeline to be built. After all, these farms were here first. And how many area farmers signed on to the easements because they didn't want to push the risk of losing land value onto their neighbors? These neighbor relationships go back to multi-generations, just like the farms themselves. And in the case of adjacent landowners, there is no economic benefit and no pseudo-economic benefit model from the pipeline companies that will compensate them for their future loss of development potential. According to Navigator's research, we trade our property rights for about 19 cents a bushel. Please pass this ordinance with the $750 setbacks or deny it and let Lincoln County residents decide. Let's work together to minimize the development of dead zones in Lincoln County. Thank you. The map that I showed the commissioners is here. Let's see, I don't think this is going to show, but I would send you to, this map can be found at co2pipelinezone.com. Out of focus. Excuse me. Thank you.
I'll just make this quick. I agree with everything that everybody has said so far. My name is Dana Bosma. This is my property. This is where the pipeline is going. I'm right off the Lenox exit. My address is 2011 Virginia Lane, Eagleville, Pennsylvania. My family all owns property in Lincoln County. I'm an environmental teacher, and I want to just say a couple things that as yet CO2 capture and sequestration has not been shown to be successful.
Ma'am?
Yes.
I'm going to have you finish up. The half hour has expired, so if you can just finish your
says
statement.
29 minutes here, 29
The
seconds.
the red light is on, indicating that your time is up. Thank you. Now we'll take opponent testimony, I'm sorry. And you will be given a total of 30 minutes as well.
Good morning, Commission. My name's Aaron Eldridge. I am the Summit Carbon Solutions Pipeline Project Manager for South Dakota. My address is 2321 North Loop Drive, Ames, Iowa. And I've spoken a few times with the Planning and Zoning Commission, spoken a few times with you all as well. And so I won't belabor a lot of points. I would be more than happy to answer a lot of questions that you guys may have about any of the topics involving funding. The bores, why would we bore 90 feet deep? I'd be more than happy to talk through why that is and the reasons for that. Safety, and we do have individuals to chat about that as well. Indemnification from insurance, road use maintenance agreements that we have sent to the counties and to the highway superintendents of every county for them to review, to sign, to make sure that we're maintaining the roads that we use during construction and operations of the project. Process waste or encroachments. So I've personally met with 7 of the water districts in South Dakota, specifically Lewis and Clark and Lincoln County Water, and we did talk about the concerns of the base. Not a concern if you go a certain depth of cover, and make sure that you don't hit that base material when you're going beneath it. I'd be more than happy to talk specifics about that. One thing I do want to address to anyone in the room is that if you know of anyone that has a pipeline within 100, 200 feet, as was mentioned, like, please show me, please tell me. That is not something that I have seen on the route, and I would be genuinely happy to ensure that we can talk about that and get that addressed. So genuinely, if you know 100, 200 feet, let me know from a dwelling. And
So
then,
you're out of order. Everybody was polite when the proponents were speaking, so now I expect the same.
and then the main thing I would like to mention is, based on the merits of this ordinance as well, one of the big concerns that we heard is this idea of diagonaling across a property. What this ordinance does, by being a setback from the property boundary, is it more or less forces that pipeline to cut through the centers of properties. So we've signed with over 70% of the landowners in the state, and a large portion of those landowners have requested and have had the pipeline moved over towards their property boundary, towards that section line. With that setback from that section line, even those signed landowners now, unless their neighbors are willing to sign a waiver, we have to move that pipeline into the center of their property based on the distance of that setback. So we do believe that this ordinance actually negatively impacts a lot of the concerns that the proponents would have. And then finally, I'll hand it off to a few other people, but for the record, I do want to state that we, Summit, do believe that this ordinance is preempted by federal and state law, and so we are opposed to this ordinance and any amendments that might be suggested to this ordinance as well. Thank you.
David Owen, South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I also come from lands far away. My address is 4227 East Thornwood in Sioux Falls. I'm a resident of Minnehaha County, but it is a lifelong dream to become a resident of Lincoln County at some point in my life. Our concern as a chamber is looking at the economy when regulations might inhibit economic growth. You've been given an economic study that says these pipeline projects, or one of them, will be a net gain of $5 billion to the area. I've looked at all the numbers. I'd ask if you have, and if you fully understand them, you're doing better than me. I don't. Here's what I know. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to go into this project, and we're going to get a tax base because the pipeline is there. The corn market will be sustained. We'll gain from tax credits. There will be operating gains. You've been asked to protect people. I want to talk about the people that are threatened if we don't do this pipeline. We've made a decision as a country, we don't want to put CO2 in the environment. We want it sequestered. So that creates this system and market. It is essential to the ethanol industry that they be able to have as part of their pricing sequestered CO2. So the people I want to talk about protecting are the folks that are working in the ethanol plants and their families. My fear is that we will see ordinances passed across the state that are de facto prohibitions. They look like setbacks when the company says that won't work. It's like my dad never saying no. Can I drink? Yep, when you're 21. So please listen to the industry about how you're affecting the viability of the project. The corn markets need this project. The ethanol industry needs this project. It will be an economic gain for the state, and I think it can be done safely. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Charlie Clute. I'm the president of the South Dakota Firefighters Association. I live in Viborg, South Dakota. I have no opinion as far as whether to be opposed or against this particular ordinance. However, I am here because of the information that was being brought forth by certain other emergency responders that I was contacted and said, are we really standing back as firefighters and letting the voice of individuals on fire departments, and they were giving out improper information. And so the Firefighters Association is in charge of the state training for every year for state fire school, for district fire schools, and other local training. The South Dakota Pipeline Association, I'm a member, representative of that group as far as the fire service goes. So I deal with them and the PUC. Every year, the South Dakota Pipeline Association travels around the state and offers emergency services training to not only the local cities and other pipeline users, but to the fire departments, dispatchers, law enforcement, basically every type of emergency responder that is out there. When I first started seeing some of the news media of concern over the pipeline, I made contact with some of my other firefighter individuals from across the state. And then I went to the PUC. I then started calling some of my national individuals that I know that now they are the individuals that also give input to PHMSA, to the emergency response guidebooks that we all use for hazmat and things like that. And so when I talked to them, I said, what am I missing? What is the concern about the carbon capture pipelines that as responders we should be concerned about? I said, we have property owners and certain fire service individuals that are almost violently opposed to this. So I said, what am I missing? And they said, why? Why are they opposed of all the pipelines that could be in our area? Are they concerned about the CO2 ones? They're the least hazardous ones that we can be dealing with. There's no fire explosions. Yes, they're under high pressure. They blow up. They'll freeze the ground. The plume that goes off dissipates. It's not like a natural gas or a propane, which floats or goes to the lowest areas and then creates an explosion. There's no post-explosion to go along with these. So I said, okay, what else should we be concerned with? I've got individuals that have pipelines that come into the major metropolitan areas of Chicago. He was the fire chief for those areas, for fuel farms. And he likewise said, he goes, I don't know why there would be that big of a concern. As far as development and thing goes, we've got pipelines running right down the west side of Sioux Falls to all of those major fuel farms that are in Sioux Falls. Concern to me? Yes, because I'm also a career firefighter out at the Joe Foss Field. Okay, anything like that that would go on, yes, we would be responding with the city on that. But it sure didn't stop the development of the city of Sioux Falls for having these pipelines run through all their development areas. So like I say, I'm not opposed to the ordinance. I'm not here to say, yes, you should pass it. I'm just here to offer what is the concern that the commissioners might have over this development. I understand with the landowners, the last couple large pipelines that came through the area, I have a personal dealing with, because the two last major pipelines that went through the state that also came down here towards this area, one of those pipelines is a little over a mile away from my family farm area that I grew up in Beetle County. The other one is less than a mile away on the other side of our properties. They dealt with the contractors. They dealt with the pipeline orders. Some of those same individuals would be part of this project. the farmers that are up there laugh because their running joke is the areas where that pipeline went through, they now have some of the best crop growing because it broke up all the crust and things like that. Do they have concerns? Sure, they always will. As I was driving here today, I kind of chuckled to myself from an emergency response standpoint. There was a sign against pipeline, and then about 200 yards down the road was the marker in the ditch indicating a natural, or a gas pipeline running right through the same area. The pipelines are here already. This one would be perhaps one of the least of concerns from an emergency standpoint. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'm Doug Schoenfelder, I'm a New Gen board member. I guess I'm just here to put our aspect on it. We're looking towards the future, and right now, everything's low carbon fuel. It started with California, it spread to Washington, Oregon, most of Europe, Canada. Sooner or later, we're not going to be able to sell our ethanol unless it's got a low carbon score, and this is the way we can get to that point. And look at what's this done for Turner County. We've purchased, since 2015, we've purchased 365 million bushels of corn for $1.6 billion. We had a $38 million payroll for about approximately 56 employees. And we've had $164 million worth of utilities bought from our local co-op. We paid $3.8 million in property taxes. It's a big thing for the small community. We just feel that what would this place be without that? What about the 56 people that are employed there? I mean, it would be a real thing, but if we don't get our CI score, which is carbon intensity, score down, we are not going to be able to sell into these markets, and it's just spreading. And sooner or later, we won't have a market for our ethanol. And if we don't have a market, we don't really know what we're going to do other than shut down. So we're just trying to look towards the future where things are going. Right or wrong, can't say, but it is what it is. And that's the way the whole industry is going. If we don't get our score down there, we're going to lose our market. And anybody that sells corn there knows what it's done for the basis prices and for the corn prices. It's just a big thing for the local farmers. Thank you.
Good morning. Elizabeth Burns Thompson, here on behalf of Navigator. I serve as our Vice President of Government and Public Affairs, which means I have been part of nearly every single public town hall. And sorry, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, originally from Iowa, actually, but that's where we are now. I have been part of just about every public outreach related to our project since July of 2021 when I joined the company. What I want to take my time with today is to do something very similar to what we've done with each county that has had an ordinance proposal and walk through kind of piece by piece of where we see practical challenges with implementation of this proposal. I think we've heard to date or thus far kind of some broad concepts, but we want to get down the weeds of actually where some of the specific concerns are. First of all, the title of the ordinance in and of itself, regulation of carbon dioxide pipelines, the definitions at the end of the ordinance, and the references throughout the ordinance specifically mention toxic, hazardous, and regulated substance and gases. So clarification of exactly how broad the county is looking for this application. Additionally, a note in the whereas clauses such that pipelines would, quote, constitute a new land use. I think you've heard mentioned time and time again today that there are hundreds of miles of pipeline throughout this county and have been, so this is certainly not a new land use to date. As we move into page 2 of the document, we did reference that there is a timeline established in which 7 days in which the applicant would need to apply based on a PUC application. We did find it interesting that there wasn't also then a timeline for decision-making or process by the county or a commitment in which that would continue to move through. The state, your state PUC, does also have a timeline in which they must act, right? The 12 months from application to when a decision. That provides certainty for applicants and those, frankly, trying to do business. Additionally, at a high level, the necessity of a 7-day turnaround from a PUC applicant to a local application is really unfeasible to provide the level of depth and detail. We are continuing to winnow both the project footprint down, or I should say provide more particularity, but also the depth and detail as the project continues to come together. That's in large part why you see permits done at the federal and state level first. As the footprint becomes more distilled, then you go and do local level permits. I'll continue to move through these knowing that there's folks that want to talk after me. Our understanding is that this would be just the planning director, that there would not be a role for the Planning and Zoning Commission, but that would be a question I would raise. Additionally, as part of the Section B requirement of indication of a center line, that is generally not something we have until after we've begun negotiations with landowners. We start, as many of you may be familiar with a rather wide corridor, generally about a half mile. From that, we begin to winnow that corridor down so that we have opportunities to visit with a lot of landowners so that we're matching the project footprint as best as possible with landowners that are interested in participating. Additionally, there's a mention about providing a complete copy of the application. That is something that is already done. We, as an applicant, provide a copy of the complete application through the county auditor upon application with the PUC, so that requirement, frankly, is duplicative with current operations. Moving on to page 3, a list of names and addresses of affected property owners. In nearly all jurisdictions, that application, that material has been deemed confidential. We'll talk about confidentiality here in a second, but that's really a testament to preserving the privacy of landowners. We're not here to determine and speak on behalf of a landowner, nor share what they negotiate with us or the project footprint. We think that that's important. Moving down to section 5, pumps, valve sites, and shutoff valves. Again, those are things that we are continuing to site and locate right now. And we are, as was referenced, in the midst of our PUC proceedings. So those are continuing to be located as you distill down the route. That is very unlikely to have a detail we would have 7 days after an application with the PUC. Let's see, we'll keep moving through the confidential information designation. There's not clarity in terms of what the process would be or who ultimately the determiner of that. Confidential information is there's a disagreement between what should be deemed confidential by the company versus the county. Moving into probably the bulk of what was talked about, the setbacks or buffer distances and such. At the caveat before, the definition includes residential living quarters. It is very difficult to determine, especially the development of what people I think call shouses today, what is purely a Morton building versus what has living quarters without actually having boots on the ground. So that determination is terribly difficult, especially the amount of work that we do via aerial imaging to begin to develop those initial pipeline routes. Additionally, as it relates to the numbers that were established as part of the minimum separation criteria, or what I believe folks have called as setbacks, I was not aware of an understanding of how and why those numbers were determined. We can get into a longer conversation of what ultimately makes a pipeline safe, but I assure you a setback is only one of those certain criterias. Going through, I think, a couple other pieces on here. I'll reference our emergency management outreach has begun. We, as Navigator, conducted the initial wave of CO2 trainings back in January and February of this year. We actually just started the second step of that proceeding, going across the footprint. That started in Illinois and is working throughout the north and west part of the footprint, where we're sitting down with individuals from each of those departments, mutual aid partners, and going through the template ERP, emergency response plan, and incorporating local feedback. We will likely, and we're planning to be up in the South Dakota part of the footprint throughout late September and early October. Additionally, I've got a couple more notes on here, but I do want to be cognizant of time. what I'll leave you with as part of our comments is we are not here today to say that the county can't and shouldn't have a role in the development of pipeline infrastructure. What we are here to say is that everyone should have a role, the federal government, the state government, and the counties. But much like pieces of a puzzle, those puzzle pieces necessarily should fit together and be complementary and not overlap. And we do believe that there's certainly pieces, a bulk of this ordinance and provisions that overlap with what is being taken place with the South Dakota PUC, as well as a number of federal agencies at the federal level as well. Happy to take further questions as provided, and thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Godfrey. I'm a senior principal consultant with DNV. My business address is 5777 France Road in Dublin, Ohio. I'm here today at the request of both Navigator and Summit. DNV is an international standards body. We have written and published the International Recommended Practice for Design, Construction, and Operation of CO2 Pipelines. We also do CO2 pipeline testing and research with large full-scale test facilities in Europe and laboratories in the United States and Ohio. We also provide consulting services and engineering services, including plume modeling, fracture control plans, engineering design review services, and risk assessments. And as I mentioned, we're here to talk on behalf of both of these projects. CO2 pipelines are not a new industry. There's approximately 5,500 miles of existing CO2 pipelines in the United States, from 30-inch diameter all the way to 4-inch diameter, operating at pressures up to 3,000 psig. So these projects are well within the range of existing technology and existing knowledge of how CO2 pipelines operate. They're regulated as a hazardous liquid. That's the same stringent regulations that apply to propane, anhydrous ammonia, natural gas liquids, gasoline, diesel. And their performance record has actually been better than the liquid pipeline industry on average. There have been, in over 40 years of operation, actually longer than that, some of the first CO2 pipelines started in the 50s. There have been no fatalities due to a CO2 pipeline release. There's been a lot of concern expressed over a recent release in Satartia, Mississippi. And if I could address that for just a second, particularly the idea of plume modeling. It has been said that a lack of plume modeling led to the exposure of people in that community and the evacuation of people. And I've studied the PHMSA release, their accident report. And in fact, DNV did the metallurgical investigation on the failed pipe. The root cause of, or the contributing factors, I should say, that really led to a number of people being exposed wasn't a lack of modeling. It was a lack of attention by the operator, and that's why they were cited by PHMSA. It was a lack of their public education program. The firefighters in the area didn't even realize the pipeline was in the county, let alone near that village. The initial report of the release indicated it was a rotten egg smelling green cloud similar to H2S, so it was responded to as a chemical release. And air monitoring didn't start on site until 4 hours after the initial incident. So nobody was really aware of what they were dealing with due to a lack of communication. This hearing here is proof that communication is occurring. The communities in South Dakota and other areas of the proposed footprint are being engaged, are well aware of the project, have ample opportunity to review it. So a lot of the same concerns that existed in Satartia are not repeated, and that also goes to the design and the construction of these projects. They're being constructed of modern materials to the latest design standards. They're being built to source and transport CO2 that is very low in impurities, that doesn't contain a lot of the naturally occurring hazards, such as H2S that occur in natural formations. This CO2 is going to be very pure. The threats of internal corrosion and fracture propagation are going to be lower in these systems and easily managed through engineering controls. The focus at this point in the design and the speccing of these projects is really around the prevention of accidents. The best way to prevent anybody being exposed to CO2 is to keep it in the pipe. That federal regulations require integrity management programs for these pipelines. The design requirements require that the threats of corrosion and outside force damage and fracture propagation all be considered as the pipeline is designed. And these companies have made a commitment to implement integrity management practices that meet or exceed all of the PHMSA requirements. Plume modeling is done to inform pipeline operators. It may surprise you that plume models are actually already required in federal regulations. They're required for hazardous, highly volatile liquid pipelines, such as anhydrous ammonia, propane, butane, ethane, and ethylene. We routinely do that plume modeling for operators of those pipelines. They're requirements that are actually included in federal inspection guidelines, where the pipeline inspectors will come out and work with an operator, inspect an operator, and determine if they have done appropriate plume modeling. It's also a requirement for large storage facilities of things like gasoline, where they have a very low vapor point and can create emissions and create a potentially explosive or flammable atmosphere. Plume modeling is also done by pipeline operators to improve their public awareness programs so that they understand what communities would benefit from additional information, so that they can focus their efforts to those communities that would best benefit from it. It's not done to exclude pipelines from the area. It's not done to preclude a pipeline from operating in a particular area. It's done to inform an operator so that they can focus on those preventive actions. I would say that the development of setbacks can lead to the law of unintended consequences. By restricting a pipeline company's ability to site the pipeline, could potentially force them into areas where other threats are amplified or other concerns exist. When routing a pipeline, you want to avoid paralleling high-tension lines. You want to minimize the number of crossings of waterways and wetlands. You want to minimize or eliminate the possibility of crossing through geological hazard zones, such as fault lines or landslide potential areas. And you want to make sure that you cross all of your crossings, your roads and your railroads, as near to 90 degrees as possible, and avoid any areas of potential third-party damage where there's ongoing development, where people could excavate and strike the line. By imposing setbacks based purely on the highly unlikely event of a release, it impacts the pipeline operators and designers' ability to site the pipeline for prevention. And the goal of the industry and ours in developing standards and facilitating testing and consulting pipeline operators is specifically to help them improve the integrity of their lines and prevent the release of products, more so than just assuming and allowing it to happen. And thank you very much for your time. I will be around for a bit afterwards if anybody has any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the testimony, but I am going to allow for some rebuttal testimony from proponents. As I said before, it will be limited to a total of 10 minutes. If there are any proponents of the ordinance who wish to come forward and speak, now would be the time to do that.
Want to put that on the board, Toby? This is a picture of a map. It was picked up by Navigator, has been shown publicly, privately. It is on a property where the road does not exist. So this is the way they start. They decide to pick a line, they make an imaginary road, and now I have people trying to break down our gates, trying to illicitly go under property to hunt because they believe that's a public road, doing damage. So this is how we start by this land stalking. Now, you have to understand that CO2 is an asphyxiant, and if you don't believe CO2 is a problem, put a bag on your head and try to run your car and back. It doesn't work well. So when this thing breaks, you have only a certain amount of time to get out or get secure. All the pipelines that are built and referred to are not CO2. This is a new type of line, a new type of gas. If this was such a big issue for the ethanol plants, where is POET? Anytime a pipeline company comes into Lincoln County, they should have a complete developmental plan in place, including all the land signed. It shouldn't be, we'll come up with answers later, we'll tell you something different. The way this is done is backwards. It should be a developmental plan in Lincoln County first and then out from there. I think the policy in Lincoln County is a response plan to that, or emergency response to that farm is 28 minutes. If we had a line on board and it breaks, they're going to wait another 20 minutes. So now you have 48 minutes. So I think we're just going to say Lincoln County is the place to come if you want Bibles and body bags. Do not blame the first responders at Satartia. These are the pipeline companies that are here now saying, we'll take care of it, we'll be a friend, we're going to be here forever. But then they sell the company, and then who do you get left with? You have to be very concerned. I also think that just because somebody hasn't died yet, do we want Lincoln County to be the people that are first people to die? That makes no sense. Most of the studies that John referred to are only done by flatline studies. They don't take in topography, heavy wind, turbulence, water, deformation, lots of other issues. And so these studies are almost like anybody can just draw up a study. And so you have to be very cautious and break it down piece by piece of every type of topography, anywhere a house can be built, to understand the development issues are part of this problem. Now, here's another idea. If they don't like Lincoln County, they can go to Iowa and go around us. Feel free. Nobody's stopping them. Thank you.
Michelle Jensen, 27673 Highway 11, Canton. So I had a really nice thing wrote up for you, but I'm going to try and be cognizant of time since this is rebuttal. I had a couple of things from the people that stood up here. So the first gentleman, Aaron from Summit, you hear a lot about the voluntary easements and the numbers of them that are signed. Actually, I would love to see some of that kind of stuff, because actually Navigator out at the PUC hearing right now, I think maybe it's been established that it's like 30% maybe of voluntary easements. So if you look around this room, you're in Lincoln County and you're telling us 70% of Lincoln County is voluntarily signed up for this. I don't think so. We're all asking you for help and protections that way. So, the gentleman, the firefighter that got up and spoke, I understand some of the things he's saying, but you've also heard several other firefighters get up here and speak and give you some concerns about the emergency plans and everything else. The financial impacts of this and the land use in Lincoln County are real. Can I put, this is from my condemnation papers. Maybe I can't get that map up there. Oh, yeah, I can. So this is not a section of land. This is where our new home is. This is where the new spec home is supposed to be. This is where the other access of this is at. And they say they're trying to work with the landowners. They're not. These are from the condemnation papers. That's where this map comes from. And the financial impacts, you talk about the bankers, you talk about the insurance agents. This is all very, very real. We stand to lose somewhere around $500,000 from the pipeline going through that. And whether the pipeline is safe or isn't safe, it is as much perception how you are going to impact people coming into Lincoln County and being around this pipeline. And then I ask you, what is the hurry? The last gentleman that spoke told us how safe the carbon was. Actually, several people have. but it does fall under FEMSA, which pipeline hazardous materials. I mean, I didn't decide that. I didn't make its name. I'm pretty sure the government did. So we have to think about that as well. The last gentleman also spoke about some of the ruptures, and he spoke about Satartia, and that it was a matter of an operator error. Well, I'm pretty sure there's going to be operators around here too, so there's probably always going to be a leak. There's always maybe going to be a rupture. There's going to be potential for error there. And then the last thing that I would like to point out is you hear the proponents of the ordinance, you see your Lincoln County citizens in here asking you guys for help. On the other side, you get large companies, wealthy companies, people that don't live in your county, they don't even live in your state, that are up here. If this is such an important project for the farmers, where's all the farmers that got up here to ask you to pass this? If this is such an important project for the environment, there's lots of environmental people around here, lots of environmental people in Sioux Falls. I didn't hear any of them standing up here. And like Tony pointed out, we're even missing some of the big players in the ethanol plants. So think about it. Think about who you guys are supposed to be representing and protecting. We are asking you for help. Thank you.
I would just like to add a couple things. I agree with everything that has been said so far. I'm an environmental teacher. Carbon capture and sequestration has not had a good track record so far. There are a lot of abandoned pipelines, a lot of failure to capture the estimated amount of CO2. When a company actually pulls out or it's not successful, if pipelines are abandoned, facilities are abandoned, there's also a big loss of money for the landowners that this pipeline goes through when the pipelines are abandoned, and then what do we do with them? In its entirety, when you check off, when you're in a class taking environmental science, you have to add up the amount of CO2 that's expelled into the environment, versus the amount that's taken out. The best thing you can do that this county already does is keep its bare ground covered. When I drove out here, there were crops, green crops. The minute you turn over all this soil, then you're releasing CO2. So get your crop in, get it down. The pipeline is going to dig. It's going to release CO2 the minute it starts digging these holes. And the last thing is that I'll say is that we're going to be the price of them doing business. This is a for-profit company. I didn't ask them to come. I have property in Lincoln County. I didn't say I need a pipeline. I don't need one. Development up north of me is all commercial, just across my property line. Electrical company, there's going to be people there all the time. I am asking you to consider the safety and the welfare and the economic devaluation of property that's going to happen with this pipeline coming through. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a good idea why Summit is here. In 2015, they made the statement that the corn crop sequesters all the carbon it produced from manufacturing the year before. So why in the world are we even doing this? I would suggest we ban this pipeline. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open this up for commission discussion. Commissioners, any of you have any questions from either proponents or opponents that you'd like to ask?
Is Commissioner Aaron's on the line?
I don't know. Commissioner Aaron's is not on the line.
Okay.
Can we ask Toby?
Madam Chair, is it possible to take a 5-minute recess at this time, or?
Yeah, why don't we take 10 minutes, or we'll reconvene right at 10 o'clock.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So order.
Wrap it.
I guess.
All right, Commissioners, I had opened this up for questions. If you had any questions of either proponents or opponents, do any of you have any questions?
First of all, I'd like to compliment everyone that provided data and information this morning, because that's very important. And I know you all have a source thinking that this is pretty much the correct of what's happening. And so we appreciate that. We're trying to make a decision based on facts and data and so forth. So not only that, but information that we receive from you as landowners and those of you that are really concerned about the number of pipelines that are going to be crossing in our county and so on and so forth. So with that being said, though, I do question, though, Navigator, and I don't want to just talk about them or anyone else, but the carbon situation. Would you be doing this if you didn't have the tax credits? The tax credits are very valuable for you. So I guess that's one of the questions I had.
Does anybody want to field that?
Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm happy to let others too, but since you mentioned Navigator.
Can you just go ahead with your
Sure.
name?
Elizabeth Burns Thompson, my apologies, Commissioner. Elizabeth Burns Thompson with Navigator. To your point about what is the economic drivers here. So to take a step back, I think it's important to know the history of that tax credit. This is not something that's entirely new. The 45Q that's been referenced has been around since 2008. The Bush administration is actually when it was put into place. It was most recently then expanded under the Trump administration. Those credit values were increased. And then it was, again, increased in this most recent administration as well, the values of those credits. So that is absolutely driving investment in this space. That's one piece of it. I think another critical piece of the leg, and you heard that mentioned by the plant that came up here to talk about some of the state level marketplaces, places like California, Canada. Those two entities represent our largest marketplaces for fuel domestically and abroad. So our customers are putting in place low carbon fuel programs that provide a value on every gallon, not just of ethanol, but every gallon, or I should say unit of fuel, be it electricity, propane, ethanol, diesel, gasoline, is valued on a carbon intensity score, and economic value is attached to that. So customers are demanding that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'll have somebody.
I have a couple of questions I'd like to have one, either Summit or Navigator, talk about. When you mention setback requirements that actually prohibit your ability to move a line or something to a section line, would anybody care to comment on that, please?
Yeah, this is Aaron Eldridge with Summit Carbon Solutions. Yeah, so what we see with how the ordinance is written up as it stands, there's a setback from a property boundary where that dwelling is at. So what that means is if we have an agreeable landowner that signed the route and currently that pipeline route is near that section line, and this ordinance goes into place, we now have to be a certain distance back from that section line because we would have to get a waiver from that adjacent landowner. And I won't speak for how an adjacent landowner would feel about that, but in past experience, when something like that has taken place, it is really hard to get an adjacent landowner to sign off on something when they didn't get paid and their neighbor did. And so it's a very difficult thing to actually get that waiver signed from someone that's not directly on the route, which means that to abide by that ordinance, you now have to shift the route into a more central location across that agreeable landowner's property due to that setback.
Okay. Thank you. Toby, if I could, the original ordinance that was proposed was debated at Tier 1. And would you go back to recap why the original, I think, was 2,000 feet or something like that, why that was reduced down to the 750 or less or something? Could you do that, please?
Well, I mean,
The record shows that the planning commission was the one that decided that it should be reduced to the 750. I don't have a good reason for why that was established, other than there was some discussion about that Minnehaha County, the original ordinance of Minnehaha County was 750. So that would be the supporting, what I give you for an answer on that, so.
And that the county was changed it at their meeting, correct?
Correct. The Board of County Commissioners in Minnehaha County changed that setback to 330 feet.
Okay.
Would that reduction that occurred in the planning and zoning, would that have changed staff's recommendation to deny the approval of the ordinance?
No, I think really the point in the staff analysis was that we were asking for supporting nexus. You know, what's the reasoning for the setback? Is there a nexus between safety, or in this case, safety can't be used as a nexus, but is there other reasons for it? So.
Thank you, Toby.
Yep, thank you.
I have, the last gentleman, John? John, excuse me, John, for, I never was too good a speller, but, John, you made quite several statements that were of interest. And you talked about that, upon a rupture, that this dissipates into the or dissipates. Can you go more into that?
Yes, sir. And it's John Godfrey with DNV, Dublin, Ohio. CO2 is a highly volatile liquid when it's compressed and transported in a pipeline. When it's exposed to atmospheric pressure, it quickly volatilizes into a vapor. That vapor concentration has a specific gravity of approximately 1.55 compared to air. So it's heavier than air, slightly heavier than air, but it's naturally occurring in air. So it will begin to dissipate immediately upon release. The extent of a CO2 plume is really determined by just a handful of factors. The initial release, which is the size of the line and the operating pressure, what's the initial release energy. And then it's determined by atmospheric conditions, okay? Temperature, wind speed, humidity, atmospheric stability, all determine the extent of that plume and the concentrations within the plume. CO2 begins to dissipate immediately upon release. And depending on the atmosphere, with effects of terrain, it is heavier than air, so it will drop down, it will follow a creek valley or flow down a hill, but it's dissipating the entire time that it's going, and it's reaching lower and lower levels. Testing that was done at our Spade-Adam facility in the UK on a full-scale rupture simulation showed that CO2 concentration reached approximately 10% by volume in the first 50 meters from the release. The threshold for fatalities is 15 to 17% by volume. So within the first 50 meters, you had a very high concentration, but by 100 meters, it was down to 5% by volume. By 200 meters, it was even below that, and further out, it was well within the tolerance zone. To give you an idea of what percentage by volume is, the U.S. Navy did a study of submariners, and their alert level on a submarine is 4% by volume in recirculated air. So that should give you just a general idea. OSHA exposure limits for people who work in it for 8 hours is around 3% by volume. So, you know, it begins to dissipate and it gets down to those low levels quickly, just as a naturally occurring gas. It's a long answer to your simple question, sir.
I have another question. Since the rupture in Mississippi is continually being cited on this, and your statement was that it was due to lack of communication, lack of information, that the responders were not even aware of this. I mean, I find it hard to understand how a pipeline, how officials didn't know this. So, I mean, but researched this, and could you go over that one more time? for
Yeah,
me?
actually, yes, I can. And it's not that the failure was caused by a lack of information, it's the response was hampered by it. You know, a lot has been said about how there was a poor response because Denbury, the operator of the pipeline, did an insufficient plume model and didn't realize that the CO2 could impact the village of Satartia. However, if you look at the PHMSA accident report and you read testimony from Fire Chief Briggs of the adjacent county in Mississippi, who has testified in North Dakota at their Public Service Commission. He's testified and filed testimony with the Illinois Commerce Commission. He was unaware that the Denbury pipeline was even located in his county. And the emergency response organization for Yazoo County, where Satartia is located, didn't realize Denbury had a CO2 pipeline in their county. That was the major factor in a lack of response. The emergency responders were on scene quickly. But because of reports of a rotten egg smelling cloud and a green cloud, they treated it as a chemical release and took the most conservative approach to isolate, don full protective gear, and go in and evaluate it. If they had known it was CO2, they could have responded with appropriate air monitoring equipment, established the perimeters, and evacuated people from Satartia in a quicker period of time. So that was a failure of Denbury, the operator, to properly implement their public awareness program that's required under current regulations. And sufficiently inform the communities.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.
Tiffany, may I respond to his dissipation question?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put your input on that particular question, absolutely.
There's 20 miles in this pipeline between shutoff valves. On the 24-inch line, there's 8 million cubic feet of liquid. When a liquid expands to a gas, it expands 535 times. That means there will be 4,280,000,000 cubic feet of gas that will have to dissipate. Thank you.
And that was a 24-inch line,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Just real quickly, this is not a 24-inch line, is it?
20.
My point was.
Well, I'm asking because we have two different companies here.
I want him to respond to that, too.
Yeah, Aaron Eldridge again, Summit Carbon Solutions. It does vary. The Summit Carbon Solutions line through Lincoln County is the 24-inch line.
Okay.
Elizabeth with Navigator CO2, the entirety of the Navigator footprint throughout all of South Dakota is either 6 or 8 inch. We also do not have anywhere on our line where valves are 20 miles apart.
Thank you.
John, do you want to comment on that, please?
Yes, Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. And just to clarify something for everybody here and for the commission. The distance between block valves doesn't influence the size of the plume. Size of the plume is only influenced by the atmospheric condition and the dissipation of the CO2. Once it's released, it's going to reach its furthest extent. If it keeps being released, it's still dissipating, actively dissipating as it's releasing. The placement of block valves only slows down the time of the release and the time that people may be exposed, but it doesn't affect the distance of the plume. And further, there was a comment made earlier that what would happen if we had a 50-mile-an-hour wind? Well, the higher the wind speed, the quicker the CO2 disperses. The best thing you could possibly happen would be a warm day with a really strong wind. The dispersion area is going to be very, very small. So, thank you. Thank you.
I think it was mentioned that, 70% of the landowners in South Dakota are signed up? That was mentioned, I believe, by Aaron. I guess what percentage of Lincoln County farmers are signed up? I was wondering if they had that data.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to clarify. So 70% of South Dakota is signed up. We're actually over 72% of landowners in the state. In Lincoln County, we're lower than that. Lincoln County is one of our bottom 3 counties. We're about 44% in Lincoln County.
What are the other 2 counties, if there's bottom 3?
They're up north, McPherson and Brown.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Could I make a comment on
We're just answering questions right now. If it directly answers a question, then yes, you may come up.
Well, there's been a question about carbon dispersion. And I've mentioned this before, maybe not to this body, but there was a natural CO2 release in Cameroon, Africa, and the plume killed 1,746 people and 3,500 head of livestock. And the plume killed oxygen-requiring beings up to 14 miles away from the source. Can I show a picture?
We're just answering questions now.
Okay.
I mean, if.
Thank you for letting me
You can
make a
ask the
comment.
commissioner who's asking the question.
Okay.
If
No
he wants you to go into it
I have no
further,
further questions.
then I'll
on that.
allow it.
May I ask a question as well?
This isn't a time for vote proponents or opponents to ask questions. This is time for commissioners to ask questions.
But it was directly.
This is a time for commissioners to ask questions. Commissioners, do you have any other questions?
I don't, not right now, Madam Chair.
Commissioner
I don't either,
Gibbon?
Madam Chair.
No?
No. Do you have any comments?
Any discussion amongst the commissioners? If not, I consider a
Madam
motion.
Chair, are you going to?
Madam Chair, I guess all of us here are property owners in one form or another, whether it be land or whatever it might be. And anytime, I guess, you feel like your rights might be violated, or you might be losing something, or something of value may be devalued because of an action of one form or another, we have a tendency to really look at that and feel like, hey, is this really the right thing right now that we want to do as a county to approve, again, this type of a pipeline? And I guess, I don't know, I guess at this stage, we can talk about a number of things, but I guess I will make a motion, and we can still have the discussion. But I think at this particular time where I'm at is that I would like to pass a motion in support of the applicant here today and the ordinance of what was read by the auditor. And I think that most of all that well, I'll just say that I think the planning and zoning also approve this. So I guess I would look forward to passing the motion in support of the applicant.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I will second Commissioner Gibbons' motion for discussion purposes. Okay.
Just on my part, there's some federal decisions that have been made by our federal courts, one in Shelby County, Iowa. So I just want to say, because of the current legal precedent that I feel has been set, I will not be voting to support this ordinance.
Madam Chair, I have a comment because this is a very highly emotional situation. And I will tell you that from a personal standpoint, I think I've studied this issue more than I have any other. I've attended meetings on the part of both Navigator and Summit. I've talked to individuals who are very concerned about where this is. As a commissioner, you sit up here, and it was drilled into me by our deputy state's attorney that we're judges. And when you're judges, you got to put your own personal bias and feelings aside, and you got to vote on what you think is the best overall situation for the county. We've heard you on setbacks. We've heard you on all sorts of things. And there was a mention of unintended consequences. So this thing is full of unintended consequences. On one side, you could say that we would have, and my own personal bias, I'll be very honest with you, would be to have the same ordinance that Moody and Minnehaha County have at 330 feet. And why? Well, it seems more realistic to me, and I don't want to put an ordinance in place that will necessarily restrict and open the county up for any liability or any lawsuits. So consequently, I support this particular ordinance with the idea that it will be played out not necessarily in Lincoln County, but it's going to be played out in Pierre, or it's going to be played out on a federal level. The other part that we have to look at, that we never talk about, is that there are a huge amount of taxes that are paid by these companies that go to your school districts, and yes, they come to the county on an 80-20 basis. So there's another issue that you have to look at. So if you're talking about money, which Lincoln County is always searching for more money, we could take a look at that one. Or your school district, whether it's Canton or Harrisburg, T, Lenox, wherever it is. So there are just so many factors that you have to take into consideration here. But I'm going to agree with my Commissioner Gibbon over here and put this in place, and we will see what the vote is. Jim?
Yes, I agree with most of your comments that you just, well, really, all of the comments that you just said.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, call the question.
Okay. Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
No. The ordinance fails for lack of a majority vote of the board. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. We have a board action for an eminent domain resolution. Joe, are you handling that?
Good morning, Commission. This is a ask to have board action regarding eminent domain questions under South Dakota law, whereas this board is allowed to decide whether or not it is necessary for purposes to, according to statute, to seek or extend any highway or bridge within its county for a right-of-way to reach the purposes of the law enforcement center in which this county is considering. And that will be by vote of this county, and I have the resolution on the board here. We will still need to insert that property description, but if the board does want that property description, I can read it off today, but I believe we all know we're talking about the same property that's been discussed previously, and it just requires a board vote today by resolution.
I would like you to read the property description off,
All right.
if you would, please.
Thank you. I'll refer to this as parcel ID number 09849154032. And according to our county GIS, it's property description west 671.5 of south 660 of the southeast 1 of the 4 southeast quarter, lot H1.
Commissioners have any questions for staff?
I don't have any questions.
I don't either.
Nope.
All right. Any proponents that wish to come up and speak to this resolution? I think we've heard testimony on this extensively at another meeting, but if there's anybody that wishes to come up, now would be the time to do so, whether for or against. All right, can I get a motion, please?
Oh, you have one coming up.
Scott Montgomery, Fairview, South Dakota. Well, I'm certainly 100% against this. Your engineering people showed clearly that you had access from West Street. I mean, if I could probably, if you go back through that video, I think you were all present for that. I don't know if the commission has approached the state for actually getting an entrance onto that highway, but the way it looks to me, you're going to have several hundred cars in and out of that facility on a daily basis. And I don't know what makes you think that the state's going to come along and give you a permit to come out on the road there when you've got a road just east of there you could easily use. I think at some point, they're going to require you to put a stoplight if the amount of traffic in and out of there. But to negotiate with two landowners and give them a substantial amount of money, and then failure to negotiate with this landowner, or negotiate in good faith, and lowball them compared to what has been offered to the others, I think is wrong. I don't know, I just can't believe that this commission is stooping to this level. It just blows my mind. We've sat here and talked about eminent domain for how many months now? And here you guys are leading the charge. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. I hope everyone you get voted out of office. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to come up and address the board?
My name is Linda Montgomery from Fairview, South Dakota. I am in opposition, as you know. I feel that this is a huge overstep and overreach of this commission. I believe that every person in Lincoln County should be afraid of you because you are using eminent domain for a driveway. And when we heard the people who were building this, and they said this is going to be the hub of Lincoln County. When you walk out the door of this building, you're going to be looking at a cement place. If you drive on Highway 18 west, you aren't going to see it until you are right to where you say this driveway is going to be. We have a 2-story house, a 4-car garage, a small business, and next to it, a church. You cannot see this beautiful multi-million-dollar building that you are calling the hub of Lincoln County. There are going to be, I happen to be a member of the church, and I find it totally, I do not believe the church will be safe for many years. I really don't. Because when you start using eminent domain, then you're going to, for this justice system and then a jail, I'm sorry, I just have lost faith and trust that you won't take this further. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to come up and address this agenda item? All right, if not, I'd ask for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll offer a motion to start the proceedings for acquiring this property for the purposes of residents of Lincoln County.
So your motion is to approve the eminent domain resolution? I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any additional public comment? All right, any discussion amongst commissioners?
Madam Chair, if
Go
I may.
ahead.
I don't think there's a single commissioner, and I speak for myself specifically, that wants to do this procedure. The circumstances are, we're responsible to acquire property for the betterment of the whole county. The county seat is in Canton, South Dakota. After months of trying to find a location that's suitable, it was very evident that the willingness of landowners and property that was available in this vicinity that would be able to handle today and the future was very limited. To that point, I think it would have been easier to move the county seat, actually, to find a property where everyone would have been willing 100% to sell a piece of property that met to the requirement of the needs of the county. So with a heavy heart and a desire to hopefully still be able to find a resolution without having to actually sit in front of a court hearing. But in the process, we must start this. So unfortunately, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other comments or discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I want to just make a comment. This isn't a light situation. This isn't something capricious. We faced a nuclear option, which said that you either find courtrooms or build courtrooms for us, or we're going to commandeer this building. And when you commandeer the building for the courts, they pretty well take over and tell you what they're going to do. They remodel it to their satisfaction. You pay, you the taxpayers pay. So as Commissioner Poppins said, we chase as many different things as we can. The other thing that I think you got to look long-term. Lincoln County is the third largest county in this state, third largest, and we're growing. We're going to be a county of, who knows how much. So this should be a welcome situation that we want to stem up. I had hoped that in negotiations with this particular area that we would be able to put our war memorial to our veterans out there, because we have had unable to secure that with VFW and the American Legion. So we would have a gateway to our county that would say we are what we are. We're the third largest county. We're providing this. And I too, you don't want to have eminent domain. You want to try to negotiate. You try to do the best you can. But when negotiations kind of are beyond reach, you're left with only certain things. And eminent domain is a very limited process. I mean, you just can't capriciously decide you're going to eminent domain something. It has to be for a specific purpose. And this is for transportation or a road, which will be what? How many feet is this, Commissioner? 130 some feet?
Approximately 120 feet.
120
wide.
feet.
Yeah.
And I think it will be something that will be safety. I mean, it's going to be, I think, a very attractive situation. So reluctantly, I'm not here with eminent domain. But anyway, it is what it is. And if this is the route we have to take, unfortunately, that's the route we have to take. Commissioner Gibbon, you have any comments?
It's unfortunate because I too believe if there was some other way to do this would be probably more desirable, but at this particular time, I think that we're going to have to move forward with this, in my estimation.
All right, any further discussion? All right, if not, Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes, motion carries. Next item on the agenda was looking at amending our public comment policy because of some comments made by a member of the public at the last meeting. Right now, I'm going to ask to table that item. There's a legal issue kicking around in the back of my head on that part of the policy. So if I could get a motion to table, that would be appreciated.
I would so move to table.
I'll second it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second. Any public input on this agenda item? All right, if not, Sherry, we call the roll.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Next item. Sherry, you handling that?
Yep. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, the county is able to basically overhire from where they were in 2020. To date, we have created new positions, of 6 new positions. We have 3 more positions that we could use. My request is that we use the ARPA funds that we have available in the amount of 1.7 or 8.
1.8.
1.8 to cover the wages of these 6 positions. And if the position in the highway shop for the engineer is approved, then we use that to cover his wages or her wages also. And what I would do then is I would start doing quarterly reporting effective immediately regarding the positions that we currently have to start capturing those funds. They do have to be, approved by 2024 and expended by 26.
All right, anybody have questions for staff?
So clarification, they would have to be entered into our budget for this next year.
Correct.
Yes, it would have to be budgeted for next year. This year, I would just ask that you allow me to start using the funds that haven't been budgeted, but then I would use them as they come up for the wages that I've talked about.
All right, any other questions? If not, is there a motion?
I would so move, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public input on this agenda item?
Gary Meyer, Minnehaha County. What happens when ARPA money runs out? Do
Well-
you fire the employees?
It'll be 3 years. Some of the positions are newly established, so at that point, they would start getting grant money that the position like the commission administrative officer. We would also be looking at growth. The engineer for the highway shop, I think the cost that we have right now currently for engineering would be offset that. And the airport manager, then we're looking for funding options out there, but it would give them 3 years to establish the positions.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this agenda item? All right, any further discussion? If not, Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Poppins?
No.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Motion carries. Next item. And Sherry, are you going to tee that up?
Yes. All right, so we have the election service, or election systems and software agreement that was tabled from earlier in the year. This is the maintenance agreement, keeping in mind that Election Systems and Software is the only company certified in the state of South Dakota for our election equipment. So I think that we should sign the agreement.
Anybody have any questions for our auditor?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Couple questions. Madam Auditor, how many counties are utilizing this agreement or have in the past?
Well, since it's the only election
Do it.
equipment, it would be all of them.
They are all utilizing this
Mhm.
agreement. And Madam Chair, another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just for clarification, the state election office is acknowledging this as an acceptable mechanism for holding elections.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? All right, any public input on this agenda item?
Jessica Palma, Lincoln County. So when this agenda item was tabled last time, I think it was sometime at the end of June, Commissioner Poppins agreed to host a public hearing because we've been here for over a year and a half asking for a public hearing on the way the elections are conducted in our county. That has not happened yet. I've heard, well, if we don't have ES&S and the Secretary of State's office here, it's no different than listening to you at public comment time. That's completely false. It would probably take us days to get through all the aspects of the elections. 3 minutes of public comment time is ridiculous to think that we can discuss everything that needs to be discussed in our elections in that time. So Commissioner Poppins said that the Secretary of State's office, Rachel Sulek, the election director, is unwilling to participate. ES&S is unwilling to participate in an election hearing due to pending lawsuits, is what the excuse is. And it's most likely because every time they open their mouths, they incriminate themselves. So I would just like to say that, again, what we are witnessing here with the landowners, and I don't know the woman's name, but she pointed out that it's big corporations, big money, big business against the little guy. And when we have an election, we elect you to represent us. We don't elect you to represent big business and big corporations and big money. Because we live here, we pay the taxes, we're invested in living here, and we're also invested in our elections. So in this book, again, that I would urge you all to read, and I'll buy you one if you would like, but it's pretty important to your position in our government here. But with shekels come shackles, and just like the pipeline with the federal funds that make that whole industry work, the same thing is happening here in our county. So the election machines were brought to South Dakota with HAVA funds. The voter roll maintenance system was created with HAVA funds, and that's the only way that we have this running our elections. And we actually have ES&S on record saying they haven't told anyone that cast vote records don't exist. Well, that's false, because I have correspondence from this county saying that after consulting with ES&S, said that the cast vote records don't exist. ES&S is on the record saying that the cast vote records are always 100% available. ES&S is on the record saying that the CVRs are not proprietary. They're on the record saying that they do not identify a voter. And the ES&S rep for South Dakota is on the record saying that we actually don't train our auditors on cast vote records and the audit log, which again, hopefully you can remember that that is actually the audit trail for our electronic elections. Now, we're paying a service agreement for the software program, the election management system that Sherry has, Minnehaha, Davison, and Pennington have. It's $8,500 a year, and it's probably up to, I think, $8,900 a year.
Scott Montgomery Fairview, I yield my time to Jessica Palma.
And what it's for, the election management system is for producing the reports that we are asking for as the audit trail. So clearly Sherry doesn't know how to produce those reports and never has. So I'm wondering, another question was asked, well, then maybe we just discontinue using this because, 62 of the 66 counties don't have this election management software that we have. But actually, you need it to run your election if you're going to run a purely electronic election. It's the audit trail. So if our auditor doesn't know how to use it, she's still saying the cast vote records don't exist, yet we have to pay for the system that's not producing the reports that we're asking for. What are we doing here? It's insane. This is completely insane. So also, the Minnehaha County Auditor wants to know how to run the election management system, which they also have, same as Lincoln County, that produces the audit trail that we're asking for continually. And guess what? They're not going to train them on how to use it. So it was also said that last year the Minnehaha County staff had to read the books themselves to train themselves because they don't offer the proper training. So it actually costs more for our auditors, for Sherry, to get the training that she needs to do the stuff she clearly doesn't know how to do to run our elections, is going to cost more outside the budget. So this is a 508-page lawsuit that's coming your way, and you guys are lawyering up again to fight the citizens against transparency when we're asking for the audit trail for completely electronic elections with a company that has a track record of lying. Like I just said, we got them on the record. I've got affidavits coming. It's all built in an empire of lies. So why do we do business with this company? I don't know why we're doing business with this company. And actually, if you look at the state law, the section that talks about bringing the ballots to the courthouse to tabulate them is in the absentee ballot section of the law. So are we actually taking all the ballots to the courthouse to run them through tabulators? Is that illegal? It's quite possible. So I just don't understand how we cannot have a hearing, how we're going to do business with people that won't show up to promote their products. If they had nothing to hide, why are they not here? Why would they not comply with a public hearing? And why do we not get a public hearing on this? So Minnehaha County hasn't signed their agreement. And as you said, there's no rush. So is there any way that we can have a public hearing on this? And if they don't want to show up, they don't show up. But we've got plenty of experts that are willing to come in that live in our state that have lots to say about the way we run the elections in our state. So I would ask you to please not sign this. Hand counting is cheap, it's transparent, it's auditable, it's fully verifiable, and it's actually within the law already, the way it exists. So thank you.
I'm Linda Montgomery from Fairview, South Dakota. I also do not want you to sign the certification. I know you all want to say, we trust the tabulator. We trust it. We trust our election. We have never been allowed to prove that that tabulator is correct. When with Auditor Lund had her public information platform a couple years ago, she had Secretary of State Gant, who was a former Secretary of State, and I have him, he's on film going, I don't know what the big deal with cast vote records is, I just don't know. He was a Secretary of State. Chris Nelson brought in this company, excuse me. And then Jason Gant, they were both Secretary of States. And now, and Jason Gant went on to run 2 states. He was there to help their election, to become one of their experts. Well, I'm sorry, he's an expert, and he knows full well that cast vote records are a thing. What we have asked you for is please allow us to look at the cast vote records so that we can see on the machine what is going on. That is not too much to ask in a free democracy, a free republic. We have a right as citizens to know that our elections are free, fair, and transparent. But every time we try to ask for this, somebody lawyers up. See, ES&S doesn't show up. We're not allowed to talk to the public with you people present and really give you data, hard research. We've been doing it for a long time, and I know it's important. And I ask that you table this until we can have a public hearing.
Good morning, Mike Mathis, Sioux Falls, 1500 East 63rd. I wanted to just read or talk to you about Navy Commander Robert Greene. He commanded a $1 billion warship. He was kicked out of the Navy on January 7th for staying true to his oath and looking out for the God-given and constitutional rights of his sailors. Nevertheless, he and like many others, stand ready to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Needless to say, the U.S. has many enemies. Those enemies have infiltrated our government and taken over all aspects of our all-important elections by privatizing and corporating them. In other words, they have taken our all-important elections away from the public to whom they belong. Of course, our enemies could not have done this without a lot of useful idiots, sellouts, and collaborators, also known as traitors. We can tell who many of the traitors are because they had to take an oath to get where they are at, and then they turned around and betrayed it. They have refused to stand up for the God-given rights of the people, which our founders said was the sole reason governments are instituted. Hand-counted elections by citizens at the precinct level are way safer for everyone. Depriving the people of their voice through fair, honest, transparent, and verifiable elections is a violation of the Constitution and oath of office, and is doing the same thing to the people that King George did to the people of the colonies. We know where that went. We don't want to go there again if we can help it. There are better ways to resolve this, but it takes willing parties. All it takes is a little courage and faithfulness of your oath. Doing otherwise makes you enemies within. I've heard it repeated that we are the gold standard for elections. If that is the case, we want proof. Words mean nothing. Here's my final statement. We are not going to allow our kids and grandkids to grow up under communism and dictators.
My name is Penny Baybridge, and I'm in from Sioux Falls. And I didn't come here prepared to speak. I just wanted to come and listen. But I did want to mention an observation. I appreciated the attention that everyone here gave to the people that came to talk about the pipeline. But what surprised me was when Jessica got up here to talk about the election, all eye contact and attention was lost, with the exception of the auditor, who sat there laughing the whole time she's talking. I found kind of disrespectful. The same when Linda was talking, eye contact was gone. I know that it's a hard job to have to give attention all the time, but it should be respectful at all the time to the voters. I was here at the last meeting when you said you were going to have a meeting where we had a chance to talk about it, and I was looking forward to attending that. But as you know, it never happened. And so I would ask if you would please table this so that we can, look at it respectfully and address the issues. Thank you.
Cindy Meyer, Minnehaha County. I would also ask that you would table this. I was also here when I heard the comment made that there would be a public session being held. And I regret the fact that it's not going to be held. And I've also been a party to the Minnehaha County Commissioners, as Penny elaborated, that we don't get the attention, we don't get the eye contact, you don't listen to what we say. They said it to our face, they don't even listen to us anymore. It's totally disrespectful. But the other thing I'd like to say is that when your car breaks down and you take it to a mechanic, if you don't like the diagnosis, you maybe take it to a different mechanic. But the thing is, if you don't know what's wrong with your car, you take it to the mechanic because they're the people that know. We have been up here talking in front of you people for a year and a half. We've been doing the research, we know this information, and instead you're taking the information that your auditor presents to you saying that, oh no, these companies are safe. Our elections are the gold standard. Why don't you prove that to us? Why is it that we have to prove it to you, and then you won't allow us to prove it to you because you won't allow us a public session? Do you realize that the motherboards for these machines, the ESNS, the DS850 machines that you use in your county, the motherboards are made in China? So if the motherboards are made in China, what do you think they're probably putting in them? Our elections are rigged, our elections are being stolen, and if you give us an opportunity for a public meeting, we'd be able to prove it to you and prove it to you that it's not the gold standard. But I can tell right now you're not listening to my comments because you're on your cell phones up there. Do you know that the hand count error rate is 2%? The machine error rate in the state of Arizona was 68%. We know what we're talking about. The machines are rigged. The machines are flipping the votes. There's 100 ways they can steal our elections, and they're using them all. So give us an opportunity for a public comment or a public session so we can air all this information and get it out there. And in the meantime, please table this. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, if not, I consider a motion. Do we have a motion to approve already, Sherry?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Sherry, you're our elected auditor, and I know you run the election. So is there any additional comment that you would like to make before we vote on this?
Well, I just stand on my statement that at this time, Election Systems and Software is the only company certified in the state of South Dakota for the election equipment. So I believe it should be signed.
Thank you. Any further discussion amongst commissioners?
Comments?
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. As far as the holding a meeting, I gladly will pick a date and set one, but again, I would like to have alternative people, but with pending litigation and such, I'm not even sure if our auditor should speak at something like that. I gladly come and listen. We can pick one for August, if that would help. I don't know that that's going to impact because the base of information coming from the state is these are certified. These are mechanisms and they will not function without this software update. I think the battle that you're battling will continue. I don't think this action will stop it by any means. But there are mechanisms that hopefully the coordinator, our auditor will take to verify through elections to take random selections out of the ballots and possibly run them. I can't tell her that. I do not believe, as opposed to what I've heard from Minnehaha County in running the elections. I think it's up to her to run the election. We give a budget for her to run the election. I believe the state has made it clear that they support these machines. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that is our direction. And the battle as far as the CVRs, wait a minute, yes, CVRs are going to continue. And I hope that answer gets through the court systems and is answered once and for all. So, Madam Chair, that's all.
Thank you. Any other discussion amongst the commissioner?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
I'm gonna react. I take umbrage from any statements that is made that we are implicit not being good Americans or that we're subjugating our responsibility because of corporations or something like that. I took an oath of office to defend the Constitution and represent the citizens of Lincoln County. And anybody that wants to have an argument on that, I'll be happy to talk to them. The other thing I want to mention is at the National Convention of Counties, which we just concluded, and I may make a report on that in a minute. But when I heard the abuse that county auditors are taking across the country by being threatened, by their families being threatened, life being threatened because of their constitutional responsibility to conduct good, safe elections, which they do, that to me, you people who want this, look at yourself sometime because some of the tactics that you're using are despicable. And I'm not accusing any of you doing that, but I'm saying across the country, this is not unique here in Lincoln County. This is in counties across the entire country. Call the question.
Any other comment? All right, Sherry, we call the roll, please.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes, motion carries. We have our budget work session. Sherry, do you want to do that now? Or do you want me to take the reports, comments and reports first?
Whichever way you'd like to do it. I don't know do anybody need a recess before we get it started in that, or?
Yeah, would anybody like a break? Yeah, you need 5 or 10?
5.
5, okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Because of the length that might get it involved with the budget work session, I'm gonna ask, this will be the time for opportunity for public comment. We'll take that first. Folks can come up and speak to any item not on our agenda today.
Gary Meyer, resident of South Dakota. The reason the people all across this country are rising up is because we, the people, are pissed off. This country, which is being run by our government, is going to hell. And Commissioner Schmidt, you are very upset about the harassment and action against the auditors. What do you think is happening to our landowners? They are being sued, harassed, and their land is being taken from them. I at least commend you for voting for the ordinance. And for the commissioner's failure to pass the ordinance.
Sir, this is for items not on the agenda.
Is that a law?
It is our public comment
Is it a
policy.
law?
If you're going to argue with me,
Is this
you're out
free
of order.
speech?
You may have a seat or leave. You're out of order. You may
I
have
will
a seat
continue.
or leave.
I will continue. As for this commission not to pass that ordinance.
Would you like me to
because
have
of-
law
because a
enforcement remove
Because
you,
of a
sir?
commissioner being gone seems like a lack of responsibility.
Sir, would you like me to have law
Did you
enforcement
notice
remove
the
you, or
commi-
do you
did
want
you
to
notice
leave
the
on your
pipeline
own?
people smiling when they left? I can't believe you don't support the people.
Anybody else that'd like to speak for public comment today for items not on the agenda?
Scott Montgomery, Fairview, South Dakota. Public comment policy, it needs a whole revamping. I mean, I know there was a change put in place about when the documents could be presented, and, but I think the whole thing needs to be thrown out and start over. When are we start having meetings at night where the public can show up? You guys get paid to be here. We all take time out of our busy days. There are many people losing wages. So why in the heck are we sitting here during the day? Because you don't want the public here. You don't want to hear the people you represent. Now, these people with all the money over here, you're glad to accommodate them. They're getting paid too. And they're getting paid handsomely. So why are we where we're at? Because you don't want to hear from us. And you wonder why Jim, you brought up that people are being threatened all over the country. The auditors are being threatened. Have they been threatened here? Why'd you drag that in here? We have not threatened anyone here. But you dragged that in like we're part of that. We're not part of that. We've been very respectful at this, and we keep getting kicked in the face over and over and over again. Poppins said he'd have a meeting. Has he done it? No. And you went ahead and passed us giving ENS more money. I mean, you wonder why we're frustrated? Because you don't listen to us. We stand here for hour after hour. We've spent hundreds of hours of our own time researching, and nobody will listen. Do you think there's cause for frustration? If you're not, you're ignorant.
Sir,
I mean, what?
public comment is for services and policies of the county commission.
Yeah, and you're not doing it.
It's not for personal attacks.
It's not about personal
And you
attack.
calling us ignorant, that is a personal attack.
You read it however you want.
So again, your time is done.
Yep, sure is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to make public comment today?
Yeah, Mike Mathis, Lincoln County, Sioux Falls. Yeah, we're taking away our free speech, and is that where we really want to go here? I mean, that's our First Amendment. So what are we doing? But, to Jim's point, if we could just get proof on anything, we would love it. I'm not calling you out, Jim, but show us the proof is in the pudding, not words. We don't want words anymore.
Hello, Linda Montgomery from Fairview, South Dakota. I would like to propose a solution. And that would be, I would like a hearing a regular business hearing on hand counting at the precinct level. To go back to where there was something on the agenda today that was recertified, what I'm proposing is let's give the election back to the people. And that means hand counting at the precinct level. We did it for years. I know it's not popular, and I know it's cheaper. And guess what? The people will get involved. And you say, well, how can that happen? How can, that shouldn't and can't fall on one person's shoulder, meaning the auditor. It can't. If something like that happens, and it's happened in other states and in other counties, it's the precinct people, it's the legislature. We get people to help. And do you know what? The people would be involved, and they would be able to trust their election because they counted it with their neighbors at the precinct level. It was all tallied, and then it was brought to the courthouse, and each precinct would
Ms.
have that.
Montgomery,
Yes.
We've been really tolerant and polite regarding this. I have asked that public comment be limited to items not on the agenda.
Hand counting
But yet
is
you
not on the
are-
agenda.
But yet you are going back again and again and again to the election.
Hand counting was
So I'm
not
going to
on
end
the
your
agenda,
time.
Madam
I'm going
Chair.
to end your time.
That is fine, but I
Next person who would
wanted
like to make a
said that no, hand counting was not on the agenda.
Next person. Please keep it germane to items not on the agenda.
Oh, this is not on the agenda.
Thank you.
I don't know how you put a picture up there, or I'd like to put this, I don't know how that gets up there. Do you have some way of turning that on? There. Oh, you can't read it, sorry. So I worked the last 13 years in customer service in an office, and the projection of people in the office, you encourage good service and respectfulness. Right now, in your auditor's office, there are two signs. When the queen is happy, there's peace in the kingdom, okay? But the other one, all stressed out and no one to choke.
This is not for personal attacks. So
Ma'am,
your
I'm talking
time
about
is
the
done.
auditor's office, and
Your
you said that
time
this
is done. This is a
speaking was to
personal
talk
attack
about
on our auditor,
things
and
that are
I'm
with
not
the
allowing
county.
it.
Okay,
You may have a seat unless you would like to follow the policy.
and is the policy to talk about things that are happening in the
Services
county and the
policies
services?
of
This
the
is dealing
county.
with the service. There's I never mentioned a name, I just said, sitting in the building, in the next room, there's a sign that says, all stressed out and no one to choke.
And this county commission has no authority over our auditor.
I'm sorry, just mentioning, I think that's something for customer service that should be reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Palama, Lincoln County. So I don't know, you being a lawyer, Tiffany, if New York Times versus Sullivan comes to mind, if it rattles around back there somewhere. The Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Justice William Brennan, reviewed the matter, and this is about public debate, public comment, against the background of a profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials, noting that the advertisement at hand would qualify for constitutional protection. The court considered whether its inaccuracies had forfeited that constitutional protection. The court, in a unanimous 9-0 decision, established that statements under such circumstances involving a public official plaintiff must be false and made with actual malice, that is, with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. So what Penny was saying was not false. That's a fact. There's a sign out there, and that's what it says. And your public comment policies are that of a tyrant in a communist government. As far as I know, we're getting awfully damn close to losing the First Amendment. But it's not happening on our watch. So you can threaten and intimidate all you want, but we can stand here and say whatever the hell we want. And you can't do anything about it. And if you try to, we can sue you. So that's what we think of your public comment policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment policy for the rest of this meeting and move on to commissioner reports. Any reports from the commission?
Madam Chair, I want to briefly state that last week, our auditor and myself attended the National Association of County Officials Annual Meeting, which was held in Austin, Texas. At that meeting, there were 10 individuals from South Dakota. There were 3 commissioners, 2 from Pennington County and myself. There was an auditor from Davidson County, from Union County, Lincoln County, and a treasurer from Bennett County. And they discussed several items that were indicative of their responsibility. For the commissioners, we covered such topics as artificial intelligence and what that means to the future of your county. And all I want to tell you is it will change county government completely. Artificial intelligence is something that has been here, but it will have an ever-increasing influence. And if you think that the internet has changed things, artificial intelligence will be on steroids from what you had from the internet. We also covered such things as public safety. We covered health. Just an anecdote, every 11 minutes in our country, there is a suicide. 64% of those suicides are in rural areas of our country, which says that we do have a very situation, a mental health situation that is occurring. We covered the veterans and their situation. We covered housing. We covered the future of ethanol and transportation. We covered immigration and cybersecurity. And we also covered elections from the county perspective on what was happening in our country. And it was a very worthwhile event. And I would encourage our other commissioners to continue to do that. And I was very proud of our auditor as she became engaged, and she probably will be serving on a committee which will enhance her understanding and make some contributions to other auditors. So that's my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other reports today? All right. If not, we'll move on to our budget work session.
Okay, so I'm not sure where you want to start. I've got the information in front of you. We could see some of the department heads here. Did you want to pick who to start with? How do you want to do it?
I will take volunteers. Is there anybody here that wants to talk on their budget?
Don't be shy.
Terry, you got the big.
I'm not making you come up here.
What page?
What page?
What page?
Terry's is going to be starting at 44-ish, 43.
23?
You want to do the road and bridge first, and then weeds?
Yes,
Okay.
because weeds basically, the only thing in the weeds is that we had to do a change from what you see. We did a change from the account 427100 for 52,000 to account 429700. That would be the only change, don't you agree, Terry?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's. the-
Otherwise,
Correct, yes.
okay.
All right. Road and bridge. You want to go through line by line again like we did last year, or what do you want? You want the highlights of where I'm spending my money?
Highlights are good.
Yeah.
Works for me. All right. I'll start with my equipment budget first.
Where's he at then? 43?
Page 43.
So equipment line item is going to be $436,200, I believe it
Roads and
is.
bridge. Okay.
All right, I have 529,000 under equipment. First thing this year, I am hoping to purchase 2 trucks next year. I've been speaking with dealers It might be difficult. So the sooner that I would know if you're gonna approve the purchase of those, I could set it up with a dealer to sign off that we'll get something in a build slot if they have some available for next year. Cost I have on those, 2 trucks, again, this is chassis only. Mack or Freightliner, $283,000 for 2 of them. So,
Terry, didn't we get 2 trucks in 2021? Weren't they new trucks at that time?
correct. Yeah, actually 2022.
We didn't get them till 2022, right?
Yes, we got the trucks last year. They came in like August last year. So September, no, it was October last year. Our trucks came in. Those are 2 Freightliners we got. So this year, we have to get equipment put on them this year. I think we're getting close, according to the manufacturer, of getting equipment, boxes, wings, plows mounted up on them. So they should be, from what we're being told, they should be ready for use this winter.
And the 2 that you'll be replacing, you'll liquidate?
Yeah, in fact, we ended up getting, one of them, we sold one of them this year on auction, to replace those. And then if we're allowed to get 2 more for '24, there'll be 2 more trucks once those get in, to, replace. Now, I will say this, I did not put the money in there for the equipment on those next year.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I didn't see it here in your budget.
Yeah, it's not. So I have the boxes, the wing and the plow, budgeting in '25 for that. Just because I wanted to keep my number down this year, or kind of mediate it out over the years. At the beginning, I might have the problem of, even if I order it late this year, the equipment may not be ready until '25. I mean, we're
Takes
looking
that
that far
long
behind.
yet.
Yeah. So,
The trucks that you're going to replace, Terry, are how old?
they are probably 2004s.
2004?
Yeah, I think so. 2004, 2006. We have several of them that they're in tough shape.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, after 10 years, they're probably high mileage, high maintenance too.
yeah. I mean, the salt in wintertime takes a toll on them.
Terry, we've for years have had a situation in heavy equipment that it takes time to get things, and usually you're lucky enough that you would usually get it in the year that you wanted it. That isn't the case at all anymore. Do your suppliers indicating at all that there's at any light showing up in this tunnel of either a supply issue or demand issue that's going to start getting people having more confidence when they order it in the year that they're actually going to get it in that year?
No,
Okay. So,
not to pre-COVID, the way it was pre-COVID.
so we'll,
I mean, they're still talking, it's, for like trucks, a year.
same token, which goes back to the equipment then, yeah, I know you're trying to hold it back. Given how long it takes to have equipment, I'm not excited about having trucks sitting there if we can't get the equipment either. So I think they need to be bought, if it takes X amount of time for the truck and it takes 2X for the equipment, or it takes half X, we better be making sure that we're ordering them in appropriate time to make sure that we're, utilizing the equipment.
Yep, so I can't order equipment until I have a delivery date on my trucks. Or
They
until the
won't
trucks
let
go in.
you order it?
No,
They won't.
I can't order it until I get the trucks ordered, or the
Is that
truck,
because they need to know the exact build specs for the truck?
correct.
They won't even let you go into the system.
No, because it'd be too far out.
So how much time, from the build date, how long does it usually take to get the equipment then?
So we ordered our snow equipment for these new trucks we got last year. We ordered them in October, I believe, last year. October, November is when we placed the order. They told us it'd be June. We're to be ready. Haven't heard anything. Well, we did hear something that they're getting close, and that was back in July. So hopefully, they're thinking the next month and a half, we'll be in to get those built.
So there is no reason to put in your budget. All right, for the equipment side of it.
All right, what else you got, Terry?
I also, so this year, we purchased a 650, 6500 Chevy pickup, chassis only, for a signed utility truck. Again, didn't have the money in this year's budget because I didn't know when I was gonna get it, for the box. So will we have to have a box in the budget for next year, for 72,000? For a box for that?
The box is 72,000?
Yeah, we're gonna have a custom-made box. We'll have a crane on it. I mean, it's
Oh,
gonna be a
it's-
signed truck.
It's not just a box, it's a service.
Yeah, it's a service body. Yes. Yep. Next item I have a live bottom trailer. It's a used one. I'd be looking for a used one. Again, this we'd use for hauling asphalt behind a tractor truck, for 49,000. So we have this old JCB backhoe. It's probably back from the 80s. We don't use it anymore. It's got so many leaks. I want to get rid of that and then replace it. I want to get a mini excavator. I have 125,000 budgeted for a mini excavator. So that is the conclusion of my equipment budget, those items. Now, I do have in capital outlay for projects, I do have money budgeted in there as well for the office additions at the shop, which finally got some drawings back from the architect. I do not have any cost estimates yet. Again, we're working with them to smooth some of those out, but before we bring them to you guys. But I do have 425,000. I know it's high, but again, I don't know what costs are going to be with that. So. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll move on to my projects. Next year, I will have 11 miles of mill and overlay projects. County Road 110, County Road 111, County Road 117. County Road 111 is going to be part of the agreement with T on the mile from 271st to 270th or 85th Street, that we will put a mat on that, an overlay on that. So cost I have on that project is $1,870,000 for that project. Next project I have, DOT bridges. We have 4 structures from the 2020 federal state grant process. Those should be built next year, hopefully. I have $365,000 put down for that. Next one I have is a big grant. This is a preservation grant for 42020201. I have $465,000 on that. There's a cost share on that project. Total project cost of that is $1.2 million. Next project is I have a microsurfacing project. County Road 106, 123, 110. It's going to be about 13 and a half miles, 14 miles total. I have $865,000 for that. Of course, then I have in my project list from 429-2, I'm going to have payments out to the city of T and the city of Harrisburg for the roads. And the last project I'm going to have on there is we have some FDR and stabilization on County Road 134, which is just 3 miles south of 18. We're going to do 7 miles of that is the plan. We're going to take and pave that ourselves. So I have on my paving budget, usually I only have about 12,000 ton that we're doing, but I put in there 18,000 ton this year. So we can pave that ourselves. We'll save some money paving it ourselves rather than getting a contractor to do it, so. And then the last thing I have in there, it's a study. Again, we just submitted a grant application for Safe Streets for All for an action plan grant, just a safety plan grant, for Lincoln County, so I have 125,000 in there for that. Anything else in there would be under fuel, culverts, signs. I have money in there for mastic and crack sealing. I think, if I added it up right, I think I'm about 3 or 4% higher than what I am this year, for this year's budget.
There is one correction that we have to do in Terry's budget also. I need to increase his federal grant revenue by 100,000.
No.
We did put the expenditure in there, but we didn't put in the revenue. And if the grant doesn't happen, the expenditure doesn't happen, so,
Do you want that done on this provisional?
yep, I'm gonna add that to the provisional.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Terry?
Pretty bare bones.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Who's next?
Emergency management.
Harold.
Morning, Harold.
Good morning, how we doing?
Good, how are you?
Page. My budget won't change much at all unless there's a salary change. If you have any questions on it, I'd be trying to answer them.
49, page 49.
Or, I'm sorry, page 50.
Harold, I have no questions.
I don't have any other questions for Harold either.
Yeah, and the top portion of my budget, category 41 is reimbursed on a 50% level by FEMA and the state of South Dakota, so salary and administrative expenses. If there are no questions,
There are no questions.
I have no questions.
thank you.
Thanks, Harold.
Thank you, Harold. Up. Here comes Peters.
Morning.
Hey, John.
Good morning.
Hold on
I'm
a
here to
minute.
talk about the GIS budget,
Hold on a minute, John.
What page?
page
You guys-
17.
17.
17.
Way towards the front.
Okay.
There's no changes to what I've submitted. There has been an increase. I did have to supplement my budget last year by $400 for supplies and materials. Expected to have to buy a lot of address signs because of all the rezonings and new lots and new building again this year, and again possibly twice next year, and they run pretty expensive. So my budget went up to 4,000 from 1,000. Expect also.
John,
Sorry.
you meant address signs. What?
Address signs. So the GIS department assigns addresses to new buildings and then provides the green sign that you see on those buildings, and also has to purchase the numbers that are put on them.
Okay.
So
Are you paying for out of your budget for rezone signage and things like that?
not rezone signage,
Okay.
I'm sorry,
I-
just the addressing sign for
Thank
the
you.
buildings that are being built.
Yep.
Sorry, I'll
And
slow
that's not a
down.
cost that's passed on when they get,
No.
is it part
Wow.
of the cost of the permitting?
It would be absorbed in that cost, sure. We do not charge for that sign. In some cases, we get signs that are run over or damaged or are no longer visible because they've deteriorated. In that case, we also provide that sign when requested, a replacement
What are those
sign.
signs used for, John?
Pardon?
What are those signs
It's
used
your home
for? Are
address
they-
sign.
Are they?
That's for 911 or people trying to find an address when they're out driving around.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Repairs and maintenance, we've been zeroed out on that. That's our printer for large-scale maps and other requests from other departments. That's expected to cost us $2,000 possibly next year for internal maintenance of the mechanisms in that printer. Going up the budget, I'm going all over, I guess. $45,000 a year is what we pay for aerial photography for the GIS. We replace that or fly that every 2 years. Every year, it's about $45,000. We have a contract yet for 2 more flights. travel and conference, training is what that represents. The Esri conference is a training session that I put in there for attending that. It's in San Diego. The conference is given or is free based on that we have the software license, and then that's just room, board, travel to go to that. It's really essential that you remove yourself from the admin side here and go to those conferences where you can get saturation and the full benefit of that training versus a virtual. Other than that, we're straight on the utilities, and, well, that's all I have.
Then floodplain management is the second one, that's on page 26.
Yeah, that was the one I was most interested in. What was that
Sure.
big bump for?
The big bump is projects that are listed in our master drainage plan under the CIP program, feasibility studies for, I'm not sure which ones they were, but they're the first three in the master drainage plan. If you wish to pursue those projects that are recommended by that master drainage plan, then that's what that will cost. There is a $20,000 there for floodplain permit review and related. The other is the $80,000 that would be the CIP projects.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? All right, if not, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commission. Carla Gosen, Director of Equalization. Very little has changed on my budget from last year
Page are we on?
to this year.
Hold on a minute, Carla,
Or
we
excuse
need
me,
to-
23 to 24.
We need to get them on a page, page 12.
12.
Well, boy, get closer.
Okay, sorry, Carla.
Ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I've highlighted some of the notable line items that have changed, some of which are out of my control, such as professional fees. That would be postage. So I took the amount of postage that the federal government increased, took it by our average growth in parcels, and came up with about $2,000 difference for postage rates. Another thing that was that increased was our certification and training. So each year we have to go to workshops and conferences in schools. I put our proposal 2024 at what our 2022 training line item was. This year, the line item is 15,000. We should stay under that because some of our conferences were held in Sioux Falls, so we didn't have to travel or per diem or hotel type expenses. So I budgeted for 15, we'll probably come under that. But next year, all of our schools, conferences and workshops are either on the western side of the state or in Pierre. So I tagged off of what was in 2022 for that. Decreased furniture and minor equipment slightly. A lot of the changes that took place, you could see $1,000, but it decreased at 40%. Those are, I guess I fall under this line item rather than the percentage. First year, talking about revenue for the Equalization Office. So this is a new line item for the Equalization Office. It's our Beacon property information portal. We are scheduled to bring in about $30,000 worth of revenue. I did break down some information, just notable, because I love statistics. So right now, we have through the course of the life of Beacon, we had 18 weekly subscriptions, 28 monthly subscriptions, and some of those subscription rate users are each month they do a monthly subscription. We had 274 daily subscriptions. That was interesting. 54 annual subscriptions. My target for the annual subscriptions was 44. I felt that if we had 44 annual subscribers, that would help offset the cost for our maintenance. The startup cost was $2,500 for Beacon. Over the course of a 3-year contract that we signed with them, about $8,500 per year for the startup cost. The maintenance is about $16,000. So on average, we should bring in, just to break even, $24,000. Right now, we are sitting at 27. So a slight profit. We could look at enhancements to Beacon, or maybe looking at a subscription price lowering to, if it would, if you wanted to stay revenue neutral.
No, no questions.
Thank you,
Okay,
Carla.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Becky Vanderbroek, the Register of Deeds for
Page
Lincoln County.
13.
13.
So my budget has not changed much. Most of my general budget is just, my salaries for my employees and things that go with that, and then just pretty much utilities, office supplies, which part of that is our postage and things that we're required to do, and our travel and conference and training for convention and things like that.
Does anybody have any questions?
Pretty matter of fact, isn't it?
No questions?
No?
Then we could do the
How's
M&.
volume of business, by the way? Is it slowed down at all?
It's slown, like I said, a lot of it's unfortunately still based off of during COVID when it was a little crazy. First we had, the refinances were a lot. And then after that, the housing boom. And for a while there, even though maybe documents had slowed down, our transfer fees were up, which probably makes at least half, if not over half of our revenue was up just because of the market. It's still up, but we are slower this year than we were last year. So, but I feel like that's only a matter of time before it comes up again. Our revenue was better this year so far because we got a new title company, and we're still finishing some things with that, but I know for sure I don't know the exact amount, but they had for sure, it was amount, not for sure, because obviously I don't know the exact amount, but like $300,000 in revenue from the new title company. So that was a hike of last month. They paid some of that. So then obviously they pay every day for our daily documents. So I believe that's at least like a $2,000 revenue every month, which in maybe some cases isn't that big but it's a decent amount to go up for sure every month. But as far as budget, nothing has changed very much.
You're the only department that makes money, Becky.
The only one? That would be sad, I guess, if that was the case, but.
All right.
We could also go through.
M&P is on
M&P.
page 55.
55? Okay.
So this is where a lot of our expense comes out as far as upgrades to any equipment, anything we need for in our vault as far as new books, pages for our books. yes, if we need any new labels, receipts, for receipt paper for our receipt printers, if we need new scanners, if we need new label printers, everything would come out of this budget, which saves us from having any usually big surprises in our general budget. I also usually in here input for some projects. If we get to them, we are constantly updating our software, but there's always the possibility, if I feel like the time is right, that we may re-microfilm our old documents. So not only to have everything on computer, but also to have maybe the best images possible. So we're not asking people to pay for images that are hard to read.
Anybody have questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I do not have a lot of new expenses. I did add $400 to my expenses.
Page 8?
Oh, sorry, page 8.
Looks like your overall request is lower than last year.
It's $400 more.
Okay.
That's just for the publishing increase with postage and stuff for
Okay.
the tax statements.
I guess I was looking with wages, so, okay. We're on the
Yep.
same page.
And then I increased our revenue for the treasurer's office by right around 20,000. And while I'm up here, I figured I would talk to you about some of the stuff that I have also done in there. So I have talked to different banks, I've looked at different things, changed some CDs around. So last year for our interest, we had 177,000, a little less. This year so far, we're at 764, and I'm projecting out 700,000 by the end of the year.
Thank you.
So, yep.
How much are
Thank
you
you.
projecting?
Thank you for your work on that.
Yeah. So we're at 764,000 right now, and I'm projecting another 700,000 by the end of the year. So
And that's just in interest?
just in interest.
So under the revenue for the interest line, I haven't done any big adjustments for that because I don't know what the rates are gonna be. So that's the only revenue that is a hit and miss type of thing.
Yeah.
So even though it sounds good this year, I didn't put it in there for next year because I'm not
Yeah, we don't
thinking it's
know.
gonna sustain.
Sure.
Yeah. So any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Franny.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sheriff?
Anybody have any questions on my budget?
Nope, you're good.
I think we're good.
So before Steve starts, there is an adjustment that I have to make under his wages under the retirement. I had a calculation error, so I'm gonna increase the retirement wages by about 11,000.
Okay.
What page?
What page?
Page
20.
20.
20.
Is there anything specific you want to highlight for us?
The only thing that I would like to address, and I do this every year, so I apologize, is things are pretty much the same. The increases I have are repairs and maintenance, and the only thing I can attribute, we've had a couple car crashes, but the price of everything has gone up so much. That's a big increase or a larger increase. From 59,000 to 85,000. Otherwise, everything's pretty flat from last year. My big increase would be the wages, the total increase a little over 100,000. But as time goes on here, we have some vehicle issues. We have a 14.5 Dodge Ram that we currently have on loan from the Attorney General's office. Really is no longer safe to drive. It's a two-wheel drive pickup. We have to return that to the Attorney General's office when we're done with it. We need a new transport van to replace a 15.3 Ford Transport. We also need to replace a jail car, which is an 18.2 Dodge Charger. I'm sorry, 2018, this vehicle numbers I'm using, with 142,000 miles on it. One thing we noticed this year, kudos to Sherry, we auctioned our vehicles on a public surplus auction site. A 2018 and a 2019 Dodge Charger, both with over 140,000 miles on them. One brought 10,000, the other brought 8,500. I think that's probably double or triple what we had been getting for them. So we would surplus these vehicles. Then we also gave the State's Attorney's Office a couple vehicles for his investigators. We have a 19.3 Dodge Charger with 100,000, currently has 100,000 miles on it. 2020 Dodge Durango with 119,000 on it, a 17.1, I keep doing that, 2017 Dodge Charger with 139,000 miles on it, and a 2020 Ford F-150 with 93,000. Project that Ford F-150, which is in patrol, will have 120,000 miles on it this time next year, which leaves me needing to replace 8 vehicles, and I budgeted for 5. So I would like to increase vehicles from 225 to 315. So that's my big request. And I think we will see some pretty good money in return on our surplus vehicles. But they need to be replaced. That's probably my big ask for this budget. We are checking with the Attorney General's office to replace this investigator, this 2014 pickup with something, a drug seizure that they have, but it currently don't have anything, so.
Steve, if you needed 8, you're gonna budget for 5. What does that do for next year?
It's, the problem just compounds.
It just keeps coming.
But I do think we replace these 8 with 7, we'll be in good shape.
Okay.
And honestly, we won't replace all these with, and I used the price of $45,000 per vehicle as the Chevy Tahoe. A couple of these vehicles are for investigations. I don't believe, quite frankly, they want minivans, and I just need to see what the state bid comes out, which doesn't come out till September. So I think the price will be a little bit less, maybe $5,000-$6,000 a vehicle less.
So,
But the bids aren't out yet.
so on the provisional, you've got 225, you need that increased?
I'd like to increase it to 315.
Okay.
And we can do that and just have it posted with the provisional budget and then go through the hearing and change it back if you needed to.
Right, no, that's what I was thinking too. All right, anything else you'd like us to take a look at?
Nope.
Anybody have questions?
Nope.
All right, thanks.
All right, page 22. Jail. Total increase from last year is $30,000 from. And the reason that is our inmate numbers are not doing what they said they were gonna do. So I'm leaving that flat at 2.2 million. So.
Any comment on why our inmate numbers are not what we predicted?
It's baffling because our calls for service are up by 20% from last year. So I'm just looking at overall calls for service, not arrests or anything like that. I know that the court system does a good job at checking our daily inmates to make sure people that they don't want in there aren't in there. Me either.
Anybody have questions?
Okay, page 47, 911, communications. The only thing that will be a little different is gonna be revenue. Should be higher. I'm still waiting for the contracts back from the cities and Turner County, but we did increase the contracts by about 50%. So I'm hoping we get those back, so revenue should be around that 450,000 mark. Otherwise, 911 is mainly wages.
So I need to increase the revenue on that to
I can get you an exact number, but the cities went from 4 to 8 and Turner County went from 8 to 12
Okay,
by population.
okay. When, can you
I
get it
don't
to
have
me?
the contracts back, so my understanding, they're all coming, but I've not seen them.
But you think it's gonna be a bump up, because I could just put a arbitrary number in there for now, if it's further away from the 150, you think it's gonna be,
It's gonna be around 450,000.
450, all right, well, I'll change it to that then. Thanks.
Anything else on that one?
Nope.
Nope. Anybody have questions? All right,
Page 54.
What page?
54.
And that's the 24/7 budget, which is pretty much all wages again, some supplies. There's just no change really. And that's the budget that just about funds itself through the program.
anybody have any questions on that? All right,
Yeah, no, we're good. We're sitting good. And most of what you're talking about is the electronic monitoring, which is under the jail budget. Nope, nope.
all
That's all I
right,
got.
all right, thank
Good.
you.
Thank you, Steve.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tracy Humphrey, HR Director. So overall, as you can see in my budget, I think it's on page 19. Is that or?
19?
No, sorry.
19.
Yeah, 19, okay. So overall, just some minor increases in the other current expenses, specifically in regards to our other category and into wellness, and that's just for an increase of staff to ensure that we're covered with those programs. And then with the staff, I mean countywide, not for human resources. And then also under the personal services, it looks like we missed the group health insurance in that budget, so that we'll have to remedy that. So it'll be whatever I'm assuming the rest of the county's budget is. But my worksheet doesn't have any amount.
So
That $67, I don't,
does anybody take the health insurance?
yes.
Okay,
So, yeah, sorry, that was a miss on my side to make sure that was in there. Otherwise, everything else should be just minor increases to make sure we have the benefits available for all of our employees. And I'm happy to go through with more detail if you guys want me to.
the major increase in your budget is under the other? by
Correct,
About
yeah.
$2,000?
Yes, so that is for our employee assistance program to increase focus on the mental health offering. Right now, we offer 3 free sessions for all of our employees. We've had a partnership with Family Services. Wellness 365 that does our wellness program is also reached out to offer mental health services for our employees. And so I increased that amount for that, as well as a higher focus on retention and celebrating our employees. As you've noticed, we've started to do balloons and birthday cards. It's just little thank yous for being a part of the county. So I wanted to ensure that we had that for the budget going forward. That amount is about $500. The rest of it's for that employee assistance program.
All right, anybody have questions? Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
HR.
Jake Oakland, IT.
Page 18,
What was it?
page 18.
I just noticed a mistake that I made on my budget that I'll have to add in. I did not get the budget for the Beacon software that we get revenue for, so an offset. I will need to add $17,000 to my professional services to cover the cost of that service, but it's offset by the revenue that we get from that site. Otherwise, I just have an increase of 4%, which is just maintaining the courthouse's equipment and replacing with our schedule. And if you got any questions, let me know.
Anybody have questions?
Comment.
Go ahead.
It's amazing, Jake. I've sat here for a long enough time from when we started in '02, or when I started in '02 to where we're at now. Give us a quick synopsis, if you would, on AI and what impact that might have. Would you be willing to make any comment at this time, or
No
in the
comment at this time.
future? It would be beneficial if you could maybe address the board either in a meeting or individually on how that may. It's definitely on the topic of everybody's social media nowadays and what impact that will be. But I'd appreciate that sometime.
Yeah, I am part of the NACO group with cybersecurity on there, and it's just starting to, the flame is just starting to go up. So we're just trying to discuss it, go over it, and everybody's making policies on it. So it will come down the line fairly soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. State's
Thank you.
Attorney?
Page 10.
Page 10?
All right, Tom Woolman, State's Attorney. And for next year's budget, we're asking for no new FTEs. So our personal services will increase by $33,907 for salaries and wages, et cetera. And then my other two sections of the budget, other expenses or other current expenses, which are sort of the costs of running our law office, are decreasing from $165,000 down to $163,500. And that's just, we aren't ramping up for the big trial that we were this year, so that decreases a little bit. And then moving down to books and furniture, that's also decreasing by $1,000 from $7,000 to $6,000 as we're getting away from some of the publications and moving to online services. So savings there as well. So no big ticket items, which usually come in the form of FTEs, so not present for next year.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I know this is outside of this year's budgeting, but when we do have the new facility up and running, have you started to look at all what impact personnel-wise for you that may be, in essence of running possibly two different locations for services? So
I have not
you
started
have
to
not.
look at that yet.
If you can, in time before that door opens, because we're delayed budgetary, definitely are going to need to, if we're going to have a shock, we need to know that shock in advance. So
I'll ask ChatGPT and get back to you on that.
very good, thank you.
That's, sorry. I can't say that, Jake?
All right.
That's AI, Commissioner Poppins, sorry.
Moving on. Thank you.
Funny guy. All right, thank you all.
All right. Any other department heads want to come up? All right, Johnny. Good afternoon.
Page 11.
Commissioners. She beat me to it. So. So government buildings, general government buildings. My first few categories, insurance, professional fees, repairs and maintenance, they pretty much are all level from last year. Same as travel, conference, training, utilities. I hope we'll stay level. I'm anticipating it staying level. We took a big jump this year. Let's hope it doesn't take another big jump in the next year. So then we go down to my buildings and structures. I do have a change. I currently had $12,000 for an EFIS caulk repair for this admin building. If you can remember a few years ago, I did the window caulking. I didn't quite understand that the EFIS caulking was also failing as part of that. And when we bid it, we didn't know that until they did it. I've checked and $12,000 is a pretty good number to get that part of the project done. And it's definitely a must do, in my opinion.
Where do you want that put under?
That's
Building?
part, no, that's already listed underneath of buildings and structures.
Oh, I thought you said you
So-
needed a
So,
correction.
I need to increase building and structures, my request to 47,000 from the 22,000. As part of that, I already had in mind $10,000 towards carpeting repair again. As you can remember, I had that in my budget request a couple years ago, and we kind of said, let's wait until we see where the building project is headed. And so I would still like to move forward in doing somewhat specifically like the sheriff department and stuff like that, carpet replacement. The thing that I really needed to add that I missed was, we're at a point where we need to do some oil changes in the elevators. And obviously, we're focusing just on the elevator going down to the sheriff's department and our main elevator here. And believe it or not, when you do that maintenance repair, it's about $25,000.
So under buildings and structures?
I
or-
need to increase that from $22,000 to $47,000.
And that includes the oiling of the elevators?
That's correct.
Okay, you had me confused. I thought you were adding more money on top of the 47.
No, that's where I would land with.
Is that labor to change it, or the oil that's needed that is so expensive in that?
It's a little bit of both. Honestly, that's to get that price, we're recycling the oil ourselves. So I'm working with highway department.
I'll
We'll
shut
just
my mic
get-
off so it
hand it off to
doesn't
their.
pick up what I'm going to say next.
Well, I mean, there's other things that are mechanically done when they do the oil change, you know. but
Does it go through a recertification process or anything at that point in time?
I would hope so. It's the company that
Oh.
certifies is the one that's would be hired to do the oil change, so.
Very good, thanks.
So probably the biggest thing that probably is eye-catching to you guys is for furniture and minor equipment, I have a total of $65,000. And that's to get to replace a full 1-ton pickup and another snowplow. As you should know, I've got, still utilizing the old transfer station pickup. It's got 204,000 miles on it, and I've been struggling to keep it running for the needs I have, and there's just times I need to have more than one 3/4 ton or 1-ton vehicle. And I'm also looking at the potential need for having another site to do snow at some point. I know that there's talk about me contracting that out, but even if we contract it out, I will still need to do some snow removal and stuff in between when the contractor is here in the early morning and the afternoon. Just typically, a contractor's only gonna show up on site once, maybe twice a day. So I'm just looking towards the future, for that need of that piece of equipment. But on paper, it truly will replace the 2004 Dodge.
John, will you be able to get me a spreadsheet of the capital outlay, what your numbers are going to end up entailing, so that I can have it for my record?
The
And
breakdown.
you don't need to do it right now. Just give me a spreadsheet that says $65,000 is going to be for a pickup and
Oh,
whatever.
absolutely, I
And
can
then
do
the
that,
building
yes.
for the 47.
I can
It's for
definitely do
these
that.
projects.
I've already got it, except I don't have it, that elevator oil change added to my spreadsheet, so I can give you that when I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
I can have that to you today. So, any questions? That's general government buildings.
All right, keep going.
Okay, so the next item I have is the ag buildings, which is,
Page 34.
so basically, again, my upper section of this, my numbers are pretty much equal to last year or a little bit elevated due to some inflation forecasting. Basically land payments adjusted for those numbers as the payments go down. And then so we get down to my bottom two items, and that's improvements other than. And that's, I had a total of $90,000 requested in. And that's, I will tell you, that's based off of the thought that I had that before a week ago, that we were putting water in underneath off of the county's dime on that site. And we'd also eventually put sewer in there. So part of that $90,000 or $75,000 listed for septic system upgrades. We obviously know that the bathroom has to be built before that. We're still hoping that some of that could, if not the majority of that, will be built off of some sort of federal grant as a storm shelter / shower house facility. But we haven't really moved forward on that yet. So I don't know where you want to land with that, if that needs to stay in there or struck out completely.
Are you saying that part of that improvement other than is going to be
The
funded by another source?
No. I don't anticipate there being any funding out there to do the septic system for the bathroom. It'll just be the structure.
John, I don't speak for anybody else on this board, but I still continue to support the infrastructure out there and at the taxpayer's expense. Same token, I'm curious, Wendy kind of handles the leasing of the property. Does she indicate improvements that would be necessary to, again, we're not here to compete against private sector, but there's a need and uniqueness because of horse arenas and riding and auctions. We are able to generate some revenue off of the property. My point or question goes back to, are there things that are not in your budget that would be beneficial for her ability to lease the property either out more often or at a higher valuation?
Well, you know, as an example is a public rodeo, a non-4-H event. It should generate money for the county as leasing or whatnot. And I don't know if it's real feasible to do without having public restrooms at some point. I mean, if you do an annual, we're talking 2 or 3 different entities talking about doing rodeos out there that are non-4-H rodeos. And, you know, we would really have to lease restrooms for the facility. And ultimately, I think that it's in the county's interest to.
What does it cost? I know Ideal Hardware, I believe, has a facility now. What does it cost to lease one of those portable, I'm not going to call them porta potties by any means, they're a little more elaborate, usually trailer and power.
I've not priced that
You haven't
lately.
priced that?
No.
Okay,
It's
very good.
not very expensive for the individual outhouse porta potty. You know, currently, we keep 1 or 2 of those out there all season for the different events coming and going.
Sure.
And then, of course, Wendy ups that for next week, or this week, I guess. So we have a lot more facilities out there right now, but we're not really looking into the more elaborate type system right now, but I could check those numbers. I haven't looked at
Just
them.
an alternative if we needed to make improvements for special events, but.
Correct.
Because it is a valuable resource out there that I still believe that has huge upside potential if we're willing to allow Wendy or someone else to promote it, so.
So we have a history of renting one of those type facilities, and the one downside to that was it wasn't very handicap accessible because it was kind of elevated on a trailer. So that made that part a little difficult, so. I'll leave it in your court on what you want to do with that $75,000.
John, does any of that include the demolition or the potential demolition at the old facility?
I do not have a number in there for that. I didn't really honestly know where we were landing with that because there's talk of possibly asking for bids for people to remove them, and it's hard to put a
Well,
number.
we got it. We know what it's gonna take to take one house down alone out by the airport, or we have an idea. I don't know how we don't have to put something in that budget unless we're been told that we don't have to do that next year, so.
I would think we should have something in the budget if we know it's an expense that's coming.
It's an expense, and it could be a very large expense, to be honest.
Is that an FAA requirement, Mike? for that?
No.
Nope, different thing.
Not for that, but it's a legal, I would say, issue having a built, you're talking about the house at the airport. It's a nuisance, it's a risk, it needs to come down. But as far as the old 4-H grounds, I wonder, is that zoned ag? Could we lease it out to somebody and
It's not our
maintain-
property.
No, and lease it to livestock production, and maybe they change their mind and whether
We
or not.
can't do anything with it.
Thank you, Madam
All right,
Auditor.
so we're leaving the 90 and You want to leave the 90 in in the provisional?
To offset the cost of that potential tear out.
Yeah, that's a yes or
Yes.
no, yes, yes,
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think you're light, but okay.
I probably am light, to be honest. With,
Well, what do you want to put in there?
John, I would anticipate with numbers that they're talking, we need $150,000 in there to tear those buildings down.
An additional or just to increase
Yes,
this from 90? to-
additional,
Addition beyond the 90?
yeah.
well, are you striking the 75 for the sewer, the septic system?
I would probably forego that for 1 year in light of that.
All right, so,
And I'm shooting off of the hip based on,
you know, once upon a time, we had numbers that were like $70,000 to remove all that, but that's been a few years ago.
Can we leave that in, Mike, at 90 and then maybe get some our numbers before we have to finalize the budget, which is in September, isn't it?
What I'd like to do is I'd like to.
See
post
that
the
smile
provisional
coming at you
budget
now,
with the
Jim?
number in there and.
So
mean-
to answer that, so if the structures, let's say we have some interested entities come in and remove the structures to repurpose them or recycle them for the metal or whatever, that number drastically drops. But we're still always going to have to remove the concrete pads that do exist and some dirt, some backfill of ground material, you know, soil amendments and stuff like that. So it wouldn't surprise me none that if there's no takers on removing any of the buildings, it wouldn't be potentially $150,000 to remove everything there. So if we're striking the $75,000, I'd say we maybe, for the septic system, we maybe added an additional $75,000 to have $150,000 set in there just for,
How about if we just change the number to 165?
You just read my mind.
how about we smile at Terry and ask
that sounds
him
like a plan.
a question?
I would agree with you.
I have a question for Terry if I could, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Terry, we own and operate an excavator. At a minimum, do we have an operator that would be qualified enough to do demolition? I'm not talking about hauling it out, but at least maybe tearing it down and loading trucks if trucks were hired to haul it out. It's a no, if it's a no, it's a no.
I think the issue would be timing,
Yeah,
you know, because we're plenty busy. I mean, I mean, we'd have to probably get it in on the schedule type thing to do, but, I don't know if you're gonna, I mean, so you're looking at having somebody else haul it away then?
yeah. I don't know that we have enough trucks to haul that away, so.
Well, you'd want to use side dumps, and
Yep.
you're not gonna want, I mean, we only have one of them. I don't know, if our machine would be big enough,
Okay.
maybe you need something a little bigger. I mean, I suppose you could rent one, but.
Okay, I'm just looking at, we don't know what it's gonna cost and,
Can I add to that?
So you.
Thank you, Terry.
We have had some conversations about them doing that, and yes, and with Jared and Terry, and the timing is everything, because there's just that small window of time between when they're busy doing summer-type projects and before the snow flies. Well, the other dilemma you have is the steel has to be separated from the wood, and that's not always just done by a piece of equipment, you know? There'll be some hands-on to do some of that. And we also have an unknown that we're trying to get answers on is whether the city of Canton will just take it.
All right.
I know, I
So we'll
just,
put,
questions.
we'll just put 165 in there for the provisional budget.
Right.
Anything else that you have for us today?
That's all I have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, did you want to run through yours? Sure.
I thought we heard from him already.
Yeah, but I just read an email that you guys are not gonna like.
Well, then don't read it.
I'm not gonna read it, I'll just summarize it for you. The jail budget is page 22.
Are you just throwing numbers out there, Schmidt?
I was informed that 2024 jail fee is gonna go to $112 per prisoner per day, starting January 1st, which 2.208 will not cover that at our current inmate rate. So that should probably.
Well, I'm going to start voting no on that.
Have you done some math
Madam
to tell us
Chair?
what needs to go in there?
Yeah, at 55, it's 2 point, let me recalculate that.
I think it's 5.66%.
I'm voting no.
Yeah, 5%, 5.66% increase. But unfortunately, that's at the number of people we have in jail today. 55 times 2 times 365. 2.248 million would be if we had the same number of inmates today throughout all next year, which is probably not realistic. So 60 times.
Since we're re-chatting, how many times do you re-arrest the same people over and over? Because
Over
they're
and
not
over.
in jail.
Over and over. My recommendation would be to increase it to $2,452,800. That's using a ADP of 60 inmates.
Say that number again, Steve.
$2,452,800.
Can you turn your emails off now?
Are we still on the same contract with them, or is this a new contract that this is
our
an
con- our-
automatic increase?
In the contract, we have no control over increases. So this is the last year, September of '24 will be the end of the contract.
New one, don't we, coming up?
So
Yes.
what math, are you running that off of the 2208?
What I ran is, I readjusted the inmates to 60 inmates per day as an average.
Okay.
And
Is that what you had for the 2208? I did
50
the 5.6% and it's
When I
less
did
than that.
this budget, the 45, we were running right at 45 inmates a day, even sometimes lower.
Okay.
Now, the last couple, maybe the last month, we've been at closer to 55.
Okay.
So as things increase, I'm using 60 to be safe. Now, we can use 55, as I did before, and we'd most likely have to supplement it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm fine using 60. Sherry, did you get that number?
I did.
Okay.
Sorry, auditor.
You're fine, Stephen.
Not your fault.
Yeah, I got it at 10 o'clock this morning, just saw it. Thank you, and sorry, Susan.
All right.
Page 12, I think.
Well,
Nope. Nope. That's what it was on. It is 14.
Any questions? I didn't change anything other than, I think maybe I added $200 to utilities.
Can you find $2.5 million for us?
Well, it won't go directly to the county, but
I don't have any questions unless there's anything specific that you wanted to address.
nope,
All right. Thank you.
thanks. Easy.
So the phone call I just took was Dave Myers, and he's been in a construction meeting all morning. So he's wanted to know the question whether he should head this way to have a discussion about his budget, or how you want to work that with him. Because obviously his budget's probably in a little bit of disarray.
He won't get hearing time. We can always do it at the hearing.
Yeah.
So just tell him that at a future date.
I haven't looked at it. Did he make any significant changes?
Not significant.
We address a couple of things that we had spoken with about.
I don't know.
thank you.
Given it's his first go-around and he had asked for some recommendations, of course, I said, just speak with our auditor who knows it all. But on that, it should be a relatively stable numbers for most parts. I don't know, though, he is asking for a vehicle out there for moving around because he does have appointments and does need to travel across the airport. So there's
He's-
probably a vehicle on there.
Page 52.
Thank you.
I do not have it unless I don't have a vehicle.
You don't have a vehicle?
Nope.
Then it's incomplete. So
Well, there's only, yep. So what do you want to add, 65,000 for a vehicle?
Oh, I don't
What
know.
kind of vehicle are we adding?
Terry, what's a half-ton pickup nowadays?
I don't know, we haven't bought one for 4 years, 42,000.
Thank you, sure. I would maybe add that in there. You need something, whether or not we hand something down or, I don't, that's what I just
Let's
said.
just
He's-
put it in there to move this forward.
Okay.
So the unknown in that is I, also that he's talking about supplementing or hiring out snow removal. Well, that would, his maintenance budget already, because of the heavy snow load we had and damage to equipment and all that was already spent already for this year. So it's probably that number by itself is a low number. Especially if he contracts out snow removal, that'll be very low.
So Sherry,
If he-
where did this budget come from?
I think it was a combination of Dave and Joe Mater.
All right.
Meter.
What number is it?
Page 52.
54.
Sorry for asking.
I don't know what kind of
Yep.
input he didn't.
My suggestion would be to leave it as it is for now, till he can get us some specifics. If this is what was submitted.
Yeah, without him here, we'll just, but I can just address that, a couple things that we'll be adding if he doesn't add on
If you
there.
want to put the 42 in. we
I'll put
can-
the 42 in for a vehicle and
Yeah, but as far as snow removal and whatever else, like,
Yeah, the initial numbers that he got for hiring that out, I don't think that's gonna be an option, so.
okay.
Do you anticipate any additional revenue coming as a change, Mike?
Well, big offset, his whole salary, we were spending $60,000 for outside management services, so, of the 81, 60 of that comes right off the top on fees not getting sent out. So,
Okay.
on his wage is going to be offset completely with the ARPA funds. Oh, that's right, you said no.
I had 3 that voted yes.
P and Z, do you have anything for us today?
Kobe.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
So real quick on the planning and zoning budget.
Page 39.
Page 39, sorry. I prepared that too, and I didn't say it, so. One of the big changes is I worked with the auditor's office to look at our revenue. So over the years, we've under budgeted essentially the revenue. We're gonna increase that, so I think we're coming in more in line with what it is. Just for a comparison, we've budgeted for this year $175,000 in revenue, and as of today, we're at 169,606.05. So strong growth, strong development, but we wanted to reflect that in the revenue. And then the other part of the revenue is that we do work with an ongoing grant in our department. That's through the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so staff does bill hours worked within the MPO area to the MPO, and then we're reimbursed for those, part of those functions. And so upcoming next year is we're going to have additional staff budgeting for that. We're not adding additional staff, we're just going to have additional staff billing to that. So that should increase the revenue a little bit there. So bottom line is typically our department, we come in approximately over half, or a little more than half of our annual budget is covered by revenue. The only change that we did have in the budget this year is $1,100. $100 for insurance for motor vehicles. That just goes up periodically. And then we handle through our office the contract with Southeastern Council of Governments. And so that contract's going up, so we added 1,000 there, so that's the 1,100. I'll quickly touch on those, is that I know you asked John about the floodplain budget, but there isn't essentially staff there, so John and I share that essentially that budget. So we are asking for $102,324.80 of additional budget out of that, primarily for 3 studies. The first study would be detention overall of the entire county. The second study would be low detention areas in the entire county. And the third study would be T tributary project. So if you're aware, a number of years ago, the county engaged in the Spring Creek project. This project was not moved forward with. What we've seen is this area covers blue spruce development just south of T. We've seen a lot of those landowners that have requested improvements to their property. Unfortunately, we can't assist with that because they're within the floodplain. This would allow us to try to help those property owners so that those properties don't become blighted in the future. So hopefully we have your support on those studies moving forward on that.
So those are the studies being paid out of here or out of floodplain?
Floodplain, yep. That's budget 26, page 26, yeah.
All right, anything else?
No, and then, the thing I'd look forward to probably next year is what we need to discuss more is I'd like to, our office is the nuisance abatement in the county too. And so additional tool in our, tool belt would be abatement budget. And so would like to see that at some point in time, possibly next year, is that we budget for abatement so that we're allowed to, our department be allowed to clean up properties if they're needed, so. Okay,
All right, thank you. Do we have any need for executive session? You do? Do you know which sections?
As far as employee issues.
So we have employee issue.
Before you go into executive session, are we going to publish the, or are we
I
going to wait?
so move.
We're gonna do it.
No?
Yes.
I just said I so move.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
I know she likes to ignore me, but really?
Is there any public input on this agenda item? All right, if not, Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. I was testing you guys. All right. And sub 4? Or do we need all of them?
Let's do all of them.
Yeah, let's do, yeah.
All right, SDCL 125, 2 sub 1, 3, and 4. Can I get a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second. Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. I'm out of executive session.
So moved. Second.
Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes, and then can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
Thank you, Sherry.
Am I sitting down?
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt? Commissioner
Yes.
Landine?
Yes.
We're off.